Freakazoid. Want to use the Force?
Do I?
Hello and welcome to the Freakacast.
The Freakacast.
+1 today.
+1. +1s are awesome.
Hey,
That is Phil on FaceTime.
That is the Phil.
The Phil, that's correct. Whom no one expects, except us, because we invited him on.
But we still didn't expect him.
Because
No one expects the Phil.
Alright, so...
one of these days, I'm just gonna teleport into your apartment. You know, you'll just be standing there playing N64, and then.
That would be so awesome. You have no idea.
Oh, we're like, damn, we were right. The one time only.
Of course, then what you have to do is just teleport into random people's homes and be like, no one expects the Phil, and then teleport out.
Yeah,
And then-
leave, yeah.
And then they can use the second phrase I came up with for you, was like, now you're thinking with Phil.
You know, the more that we start talking about it, I'm like, between the Swampster, the No One Expects the Phil, and now you're thinking with Phil, we've got 3 t-shirts right there that we should be making to wear around.
That and the base, a standard Freakacast logo t-shirt.
Or bumper stickers. That's what we should do with the Phil things.
Which, only us would get.
It doesn't matter. It would at least be funny.
By the way, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Matthew.
And, that's Phil, that we've introduced.
Yo.
And, he is on FaceTime, so hopefully it'll behave tonight. If not, we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way that I've been having to do with Matt.
Yep. Hopefully.
Yeah.
And, today we have a awesome topic
We have an awesome topic.
been wanting to do for quite some time. But before we get to it, in a galaxy far away, which gives it right away, you can find us on the web at afelson1.wordpress.com. That is afelson1.wordpress.com.
afelson1.wordpress.com.
And the theme song is from songstowearpants2.com.
songstowearpants2.com.
And today we're going to plug the Forcecast.
Plug the Forcecast and Rebel Force Radio. Rebel Force Radio used to be the Forcecast. Basically what happened is there's 2 guys, Jimmy and Jason. They do a great job. They've been running their podcast for, the last 6-7 years. The kind of an additional plug, the Forcecast started off as a podcast run by theforce.net. They started it, and they were not members of theforce.net. They just used the site as a way to run their podcast, much like we do with afelson1.wordpress.com.
Yeah.
So, did the Force.net did that start with any attachments to George Lucas, or was it?
No, that started out. That is a complete fan page. That is the #1 fan page I've been going to since basically probably fall of '99, if not spring of 2000. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But they've done a great job with their show. They have a sister show called the IndieCast, it's Indiana Jones podcast. They were doing it weekly. I think they've dropped back to monthly just because there wasn't as much. They got really heavy into it when the last movie came out, so they had a lot of content available and that sort of thing. Now it's kind of trailed off, so I think they're just doing it monthly. But Jimmy and Jason were on the Forcecast. They said, you know what? We're not members of the Force.net, but we're running a podcast of them. But we really like to kind of do our own thing, so we're not tied down to this website. So they created Rebel Force Radio just this past winter. It's the same show, just different name, basically. They still have the ability to quote of the week, which is awesome. That alone, because it's funny, when they first started the show many years ago, they said, this will be fun to put in for like one time. Then it just kept happening. And they're like, holy cow, we actually have enough content to literally do a Billy D quote of the week, like for every week of the year, and keep going. They've got 2 new guys. They're both named Eric. I forget their last names, but they now run the Forcecast. It's a slightly different show, but you've got 2 great podcasts to listen to if you want a weekly dose of Star Wars information. And that's what they do a great job of. They are press. They are reporters. They go to every convention they can. Jimmy and Jason have met George Lucas. And they've met pretty much everybody that has been involved with a Star Wars movie, except for Harrison Ford. They've talked to Mark Hamill. They've talked to Carrie Fisher. They've talked to Billy D. They've talked to Tim Morrison, who played Django. They've talked to backstage people. They've talked to Ben Burt and all kinds of people. They do a great job. It's like, and honestly, even if there's some topics you're not exactly that not much of a fan of, like sometimes they get on collecting, I'm like, yeah, it's great. There's new action figures. Moving on. The way they talk about it is so much fun. You're like, you know what? They're only going to be talking about it for about 10 minutes. I enjoy listening to them. I'll just let them go. But they do a great job of that, so we want to make sure to plug the Forcecast and Rebel Force Radio. Those are two great podcasts if you want your weekly dose of Star Wars news, updates, just guys sitting around talking about Star Wars like we're about to do.
And the Force.net.
And the Force.net. Thank you. I almost forgot that one. So a quick plug on that.
And if you haven't been able to guess, we're going to talk about Star Wars today.
Yes.
And we're going to it's a dedication.
It is a dedication.
And I'm going to let Matt take this one because I knew the man, I liked the man, but I did not know him as well as Matt did.
Yeah, and I guess kind of saying that, I'll go ahead and start off. The first, we're going to start off talking about our introductions to Star Wars. Many people saw it when they were kids, loved it and that sort of thing. I did not have that reaction. I don't know how old I was, but I know that my parents had Star Wars on a tape. They at one point had 2 VCRs back in the 80s, and so they were able to rent movies and tape them. And so we'd have like 2 or 3 movies on one tape.
Now, for you kids out there, when Matt says tape, he means a VHS.
I mean a VHS cassette.
And for those of you who are new, for new kids, that's when there's literal film reel type material spun on reels, and you put this in a box called a VCR.
Yes.
It was a lot clunkier than a CD or a DVD or even a Blu-ray. In fact, it was a rectangular, not even circular.
In fact, there was one that my parents had that was probably almost the size of a suitcase. It was a really old one. It was like one of the first VCRs. I mean, this thing was huge.
That sounds more like Betamax than VCR.
Well, it wasn't Betamax. I mean, but it was, I'm talking about a good 2 feet long, 1.5 feet wide.
Just to play a
couple,
tape?
4 or 5 inches deep. Yeah, this thing was huge. But
yes, VHS tapes, they're noisy, they're clunky. If the VCR is screwed up, then the recording is screwed up.
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And nowadays, you don't have to worry about the machine eating your tape, as I had
That's
to.
right.
Nor do you have to worry about
the disc scratching.
your younger
That's
brother
right.
pulling the tape out and you can't watch the movie again or listen to that cassette again.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they had it on a tape. Well, I didn't really know what it was. All I remember, in fact, I remember very little of my first experience, except for the shot, and we're talking about A New Hope, okay? Except for the first shot, the one shot of the Tusken Raider, pumping the gaffy stick above his head and screaming, that scared me to death. So I did not see anything Star Wars related until I met Hunter. And that's the man we're talking about today. I was just kind of like, I avoided that thing like a plague because I'm like, that's got that really creepy thing in it. I don't want to watch that.
Does that noise still bother you today?
Here's the thing. Here's what I'm glad you asked me that, because here's where it comes full circle.
Yeah.
Last year for my birthday, my brother actually got me
the painting.
a 1 out of 10 painting of Tusken Raiders. And I proudly have that thing displayed in my workroom. And quite honestly, it's like, I like the fact that it's Tusken Raiders because it's not Vader, it's not Yoda, it's not Chewie, it's not one of the more mainstream representations of Star Wars. It's got the Tusken Raiders, it's got like the sand dudes in the background and Tatooine and the two suns and everything. It's gorgeous. It's a wonderful painting. It's a lot of browns and oranges and blacks, a lot of drab colors, but I like it because it's organic. It's not something that's printed. I mean, the guy sat there and hand painted it. It's not the original. He made the original and then he made 10 copies. Or maybe he only painted 10. Either way, it's 1 out of 10. But I've kind of made my peace with it now.
I would hope so if you're going to display it in your place.
Yeah. The only thing, and Phil will know, you might know what I'm talking about. I know Phil's going to know what I'm talking about. The only thing I can remember seeing as a kid, and I didn't know it was Star Wars related at the time, was, what's it called? The Ewok movie, The Battle for Endor. because I guess it was on TV, and I saw it, or maybe we rented it or something. I just remember seeing it.
Yeah, those were TV movies.
Yeah, they were made for TV movies, and it was, it was about this little girl, and she meets the Ewoks. It takes place on Endor. I don't know what point in the timeline. It takes place on Endor, and they have to fight, like, these lizard guys. Like, to win the day or something. I don't know. But as a kid, you're going to love this stuff. You want to root for the little teddy bears to beat the lizard guys, because they're bad guys,
Well, plus, wasn't it animated?
No, this was live action.
Oh, it was?
Live action.
I'm thinking of something different then.
No, you're thinking of Droids and Ewoks, the cartoon series. But no, they made live action, made for TV movies based upon the Ewoks.
Yeah, they banged out 2 Ewok movies in the 80s.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that, let alone seen it.
Well, now you have. At least heard of it. And that was all I saw of Star Wars. And then when I met Hunter in 7th grade, I'm not exactly sure what point in 7th grade, just in 7th grade, and he was a huge Star Wars fan. And honestly, it's funny because when I was kind of going through stuff to think about, okay, if I'm going to talk about my introduction, it's like, the amazing thing is I knew so much about Star Wars, and all I had seen was like the originals like 1 or 2 times a piece before Phantom Menace came out, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But yet, I knew that Luke had gone to the dark side after the events of Return of the Jedi. I knew that Obi-Wan and Vader fought in a lava pit or a lava planet somewhere, and that's why Anakin got burned and messed up, and that's why he needed the Vader suit. There was just so much, and I think around the same time, because I want to say early to mid-90s, that's when Shadows of the Empire came out. Huge. I would hope that you, as a gamer here, are at least familiar with the name Shadows of the Empire.
Yes.
Okay. Have you had the opportunity to play the game?
I have, but it's been so long that I remember almost nothing about it.
Okay. Hunter played that theme forever, and so when I would go over to his house and hang out, like he'd play it and we'd take turns and that sort of thing. So Star Wars became the thing that somehow sucked us into each other. Like, it's weird. It started off with Jim Carrey movies because we both loved Ace Ventura, and like I remember like the first thing we ever did together, like outside of just actually really the only it was like the first thing we did together outside of like seeing each other at church or school was we went and saw the second Ace Ventura movie. And when you're 13, it's great. But then we started to get, more into the Star Wars thing because he was a huge fan. He had the games. He had that and a couple other things. And all of a sudden, like, I started to be, I wouldn't say that I got sucked in, but I was like, okay, there's this. And I was like, all right, that's kind of neat, but all right, whatever. He likes it, so I'm going to keep going along with it. And this is where I'm probably going to really divert from a lot of fandom. I'm like 31 years old, so I'm old enough to have seen the originals plenty of times. Like, if you think about it, I was born in 82, so like, typically people see it when they're about 6 or 7. So usually, you think, okay, well, he sees it in 88, he's got all this time before Phantom Menace. But like I said, the Sand People scared me so much that I couldn't stand to watch it. I couldn't stand to get past any point. So I had no idea about lightsabers. And I had no idea about, these great battles in space and stuff. I had no concept of that. And so it wasn't until that I met Hunter that I actually started to see the films like, oh, all right, this is kind of cool. As I've told some of my friends, it's like, why I didn't really gravitate towards the original much is, well, I had seen things like Independence Day. And, talking 95, 96 before I see an original Star Wars movie, well, guess what? The effects are not as good as some of the movies they had in the current time period. Because they could do more because of the strides that they had made with effects. So at the time period when you're a kid and you don't see anything prior to that, that's going to suck you in. I didn't have that experience, so it didn't suck me in right away. But I was more, I was starting to become more aware of the universe and the characters and that sort of thing. And so 99 rolls around, and here's Phantom Menace. And I had a couple more friends that were big Star Wars fans, and I had seen like a couple press things on like Entertainment Tonight. I'm like, oh, that's cool, you're making a new one. Didn't really think much of it. Until my brother got me a little Adventures Lego set for Christmas one year. It was the winter of 98. And they used to come with little booklets. The Lego sets used to come with little booklets that had like a list of all the sets that were coming out. And there were Star Wars Legos. And I'm like, holy crap, that's awesome that they're making something. Like, I'm aware of this, and this is kind of cool looking. And then as we got closer to May of '99,
It always comes back to Lego.
It does. We're gonna get a lot of things thrown in here because this was like a triple whammy for me.
Batman as well?
Just listen.
Okay.
Just listen, okay? There's a flow to this, okay? You gotta feel the force flow through you. Anyway.
So I'm playing the Sith Lord now, where
Wait,
I'm
what?
throwing in chaos.
Yeah, probably. We've already established that you're the Joker to my Batman. Or vice versa, one of the two. Anyway, what was I saying? So May's coming upon us. Okay, so Lego starts releasing images of the Episode 1 sets. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. Who's this horsehead guy? It was the way that they did Jar Jar, and it was fuzzy images. That was part of it. Because you'd never seen anything. So my first real visual of Jar Jar was the Lego piece. And he looked like he had a horse head. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. Because they had never done an alien head before in Lego. I mean, you're talking about Lego, the first non-regular head they did was Jar Jar. So it was really kind of strange to see. But then, we went and saw the movie, and then I think, another one of my friends at the time, she was a huge Weird Al fan. And he was just releasing an album with The Saga Begins. And so, Hunter...
This is all coming together.
This is all coming together. So, I remember, I didn't see it on opening day. I waited a couple weeks, because I'm like, all right, I want to wait for all the hoopla to die down before I go see this thing. So,
just to interrupt,
yeah.
I brought up a picture on Google of the Jar Jar Lego, and on my laptop here, and yeah, you're right, that totally looks like a horse.
Yeah.
They didn't quite capture his childish giddiness.
Right. Which, I'll give it to him. I mean, that was, like I said, that was the first non-human head they did. So they were trying something new, and, well, I mean, does it look like the character? Well, kinda. I mean, but like you said, it doesn't have that childish goofiness to it. It's like, I don't know if you can really capture that in a Lego figure, but okay. In a more recent version, they actually have, like, the painted... like the skin tone and that sort of thing, and it does look much better. They've been doing that a lot more for characters now, especially in the Star Wars line. So Hunter, my other friend BJ, and I went to go see it at like an afternoon show, I think. Let me tell you, I was pretty much sucked in from the very beginning. Because that was the first time that I had seen color in a Star Wars film. Because that was kind of my experience with the originals, because they were in the original format. Well, there was a lot of grays and whites and blacks and browns. I didn't find it as visually interesting compared to like Batman Forever or Independence Day and stuff like that. So for me, it was just like, wow, this is really kind of, man, you think they could get some color in there. I mean, even Yoda, if you really go back and look at like the original VHS versions, Yoda doesn't really look green. He looks kind of more like a palish green. So it didn't pop out to me the same way that it did for other people. And the Star Wars films
a large part of that is the setting, because Yoda in the original trilogy, he's in the swamp the whole time.
Right.
It's a dark,
dingy
place.
And it's interesting because in the last 10 years or so, learning a lot about filmmaking and certainly in the making of Star Wars, you start to realize, oh, that's why it doesn't look as good, because they really didn't have a lot of good stuff to work with. So that certainly kind of hinders the film quality. But, it kind of looked old, and, when you're seeing it for the first time, it didn't really, especially, like I said, when you've seen more recent, real colorful, more vibrant-looking films, it's kind of hard to get drawn in for that reason, because the visuals are what drew people in, initially in Star Wars, and then like, holy crap, let's get this great story to it as well. So for me, with Phantom Menace, like, all right, Trade Federation are bad guys. Let's go from here. We got Trade Federation are bad guys, and we got Jedi. All right, let's go. And bam, here's this bright red ship. And I'm like, holy cow, they got color. And then you get to the Trade Federation battleships and like these cool donut-looking ships. And I'm like, that's just it. This visual started to draw me in. And then you get to Naboo, and it's just this gorgeous-looking place. And yeah, Queen Amidala's outfit is much more attention-drawing than Leia's, but it's supposed to be. I mean, you're talking about the heyday of the Republic. I mean, if you look at what Queen Victoria wore, that's a lot more extravagant than they wore about 30 years later, you know? And so I just started to get drawn in. And I'll be honest, the Tatooine stuff, kinda, I was like, all right, we're on this planet a little too long. Can we get moving? Okay, here's a really cool pod race. But what really sucked me in, and you were on the right track with this, was Coruscant. Because the first shot I saw of Coruscant, I'm like, it's Gotham City. In a planet. Holy cow!
It's Gotham Planet. That would be a terrible place to live if the crime rate's the same.
It would. I mean, it was one of those things, like, I was purely sucked in by it, you know. And then they had the Senate scene. I'm like, oh, you know, because in the original trilogy, you hear about this, you know, galactic Senate, and it's like, all right, but what happened? You know, I was real curious to see, like, what caused the Republic to fall? It's like, all right, the Empire's here, but why did all this stuff happen, and what caused it? And it's funny because I remember, like, when I got to the Senate scene, I'm like, I'm looking at my watch.
Here.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because I remember looking at my watch, and I'm like, there's really half an hour. How are they going to wrap this thing up? I mean, it's just going and going and going. And, you know, and then you have Amidala get to the, back. She's like, all right, I'm going back home to take care of my own stuff. I'm going to get these people off my planet. And she does. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, that was a lot of fun. I didn't know Star Wars could be this cool. Was kind of my lasting impression after seeing that film. The next week, I promptly made a Jedi robe.
Did you go back and watch the originals?
I did. Actually, well, here's the thing. We had Star Wars on tape. A New Hope. So I watched that.
You faced your fear?
A lot. I was like, this is cool? All right, I'm watching this sucker. I can't tell you how many times my mom would come and be like, what are you doing? I'm watching Star Wars again? It's like, yeah, I only have the one, and I don't know where to find the others, and they don't have any, you know, like, because I was wanting more. Like, I couldn't get any more right away. So I was in sheer, that's the moment I was turned on to it. I'm like, all right, you got me now. The really cool thing is, you know, that kind of lasted, and honestly, that was at a time where the concept of going to see a movie again in the theaters just didn't happen for me. Like, I had never heard of that concept. It was like, you know, so, I don't know why. I guess because growing up when I did, it's like, we as a family, you know, go see a movie. Okay, we've seen it, you know. Even if you wanted to see again, you had to wait till, you know, it came out on tape.
Well, nowadays, like, media consumption is kind of, like, more fragmented. Where if you watch a series, you know, you binge watch it. You just get all the DVDs and blast through it. And now, you know, fans, you know, they'll see a movie 3, 4, or 5 times in the theater.
Right. It's very different. The really cool thing was, I think it was in either September or October. Might have even been November. I just remember it was the fall, like mid to late fall. Lucasfilm re-released Episode 1 for a charity screening. And Hunter and I went and saw it again. Because we're like, man, we really loved it. We couldn't wait to see it again. But like I said, the concept of seeing a movie again in theaters is just completely alien to us. So we're like, hey, they're re-releasing. We should go see it again. And it's for charity. It's a good cause. So we went and saw it again, and great ride again. It's just one of those things where I was able to get more of it. I was like, okay, now that I know, I was able to take the pacing in more. I'm like, wow, this doesn't feel rushed to me. Like, it felt like the pacing should be. And then...
Well, this is before you even knew what pacing was at that
point, right?
It
is. It just... I was just... Well, yeah. But, I mean, looking back, it's like I was able to take it in more, you know... Anytime you watch something again, you pick up on more things.
Yes.
Of course, all I can remember at the time is thinking, wow, Natalie Portman's hot. that was the general consensus out of me, Hunter, and BJ after we saw that film. I'm like, wow, she's really hot. But it was also kind of a think of, it was funny because I remember when we were sitting in the theater the first time, you know, BJ's, you know, the droid fighters, BJ's like, So those are going to be the TIE fighters of this series. Like, we were kind of treating it like a new series. You know, we were noticing parallels. Like, all right, the Trade Federation battleships, those are the Star Destroyers. You know, the droid fighters, those are the TIE fighters. You know, they've got that great, you know, kind of Federation march in Episode 1 that kind of... I was hoping that you'd use it more in 2 and 3, so that it kind of was like the Imperial March, that was that thread that let you know the bad guys were there. But just so many things about it just really drew me in. And you know, the whole Jar Jar thing, to me, I was like, he's supposed to be annoying. I get it. Moving on. That's as much attention as I paid to it. Because BJ is like, man, he's really annoying, and I'm like, yeah, but he's supposed to be. Get over it.
Well,
that was as much as I paid attention to Jar Jar.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that ability.
Well, and that's another thing too, is because I remember talking to my friends after I saw the movie, because he had to either have been close to. We might have actually been out of school when the three of us saw it. We're close to getting out of school, so I didn't get to talk to anybody about after I had seen it until the next school year. That's just it. It's like, I remember a couple people saying, oh, it was overhyped, but they didn't really say much other than that. But everyone else I talked to just loved it. So it was one of those things where I didn't know that there was a lot of backlash probably until I got to college. And met some other people. I'm like, people hated this? Like, why? It was awesome. But, you know, coming from my experience of, that's what turned me on, why would I not think that, you know?
Yep.
And it's interesting because, you know, talking to people about it now, it's like, you know, and I will tell you, one of the reasons that we're doing, you know, this episode, why are we doing a Star Wars podcast now? Well, we've got a couple extra shots to do. Hopefully by the time this is released, we'll have them done. But the other thing that, and I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about it in a second. When Episode 2 came out, okay, that was the first one I went to go see opening night. I went with Hunter. I went with my brother. It was the first movie I took my brother to because it was the first one I was allowed to take him to. Also took another friend of mine. Also had another friend of mine go with me. We didn't dress up or anything because that was still kind of new at the time period. The whole idea of dressing up to go to a movie, because this was 2002.
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot of people do it like you do now.
Yeah.
So we went to the opening night. It was a packed theater. We sat in, I think, the second row. Do not go to a theater on time, opening night, for something as big as that. You will sit in the second row. You will barely be able to see what's in front of you because your head will be so close to it. Your face is practically on the screen. It's a real interesting experience where I have to kind of look. I have to turn my head to see what's going on all the time because I couldn't see the entire screen. But
I know what you mean. I saw the second Matrix on an IMAX.
Yeah.
Same experience when
Yeah.
I looked back.
Yeah, the girl I dated at the time, she wanted to go see that one on IMAX, and I was like, all right, it's cool. I was like, and I'm like, okay, so I think I saw something. It was a little hard to tell. But after seeing Episode 2, by the way, before I leave this moment, I did myself a really, really, really bad thing with Episode 2. Because I became such a huge fan from Episode 1, I had to seek out more Star Wars. I had to find out what's going on with the next one.
You read spoilers, didn't you?
Andrew, I didn't just read spoilers. I went ahead and read the comic book before I saw the movie.
So you just kind of ruined it for you.
Yeah, I did.
Dude.
Yeah, because I didn't have anybody to hold me back.
You didn't have somebody be like, dude, stop that.
Yeah, I didn't. Because Hunter would have been right there beside me doing the same thing. I mean, I remember, and the Force that was my main page because they do post stuff. Now, what they posted wasn't so much the spoilers, but I was interested in really two main things. The costumes, the costumes, the characters' designs, and the vehicles, because that's what really drew me into a Phantom Menace. Such great costumes. I mean, realistically, in the original trilogy, you got a lot of stormtroopers, you got Han in his flak jacket, and you got Leia in her, tablecloth, at least in A New Hope. The costumes really weren't that exciting to me. But they were very exciting to me in Phantom Menace because there was much more color, there was much more detail. I could go home and make a Jedi costume because it was nothing but fabric. And it was all just layers of fabric. It didn't have any special pockets or, any special materials needed. It's like, you can make a Jedi costume from basic fabric you get at Walmart or a local fabric store.
In the original trilogy, when you have the rebellion going on, nobody really has a chance to, put together a nice costume. It's everything is, everyone's on the run. So
yeah, I mean, and I get that now, but it's like when you're talking about a movie-going experience and you're trying to like what's going to draw you in. Well, what's it called? Primary, secondary, what's the other? When you have a very neutral-based color scheme in your movie versus a very colorful color scheme in Phantom Menace, and you're just as a person more drawn to the colorful look, it drew me in. It really drew me in. And I'm like, wow, there's such great things. The Naboo guards and their militia, with the leather armor. Actually, I'm going to start hopefully working on a cosplay Naboo guard costume soon. Because I've gotten to that point where I can start doing some armor, leather-looking armor and that sort of thing. But with episode 2, it was kind of like, all right, I'm sucked in, now I need more. So yeah, I did the spoilers. But as a nice result, even though I did a really bad thing in spoilers, don't do spoilers.
Don't do it. It's not good.
It's not.
Right, Phil?
Yeah, I generally, I stay away from them as a matter of course. I mean, if it's a movie, in fact, that I'm really am so gung ho to see, I don't even read reviews ahead of time because I just want my view of the film to be just completely uncolored.
Right. No, that totally makes sense.
If it's a film I desperately want to see, and to the point where I'm excited about it, I don't even want to look at previews.
Yeah.
Because I was like, if I see the preview, I've already seen part of it. I don't want to do that until I see the whole thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's how I am.
But the one nice thing that came out of, other than enjoying the movie, after seeing Attack of the Clones, I got inspired. I honestly don't know what happened. This is when things started to really turn on for me, and where I remember about a week or two after I saw the film, being like, I've got an idea for a story. Where, you've got Jedi and a princess. They start off on this planet. And a bounty hunter, makes some noise and, gets their attention. And they chase into this other planet. And they fight in this arena with aliens. And so...
Mortal Kombat!
And so that started...
A very long journey for you.
A very long journey. A very, very... Oh, wait. Way too long.
We could probably talk about that in another podcast.
Well, I'm gonna.
I'm just saying that's the amount of stuff you could say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I ended up, and this was, you're talking 2002, 2003. This is when fan films were starting to emerge. You had Troops. Have you seen Troops, Phil?
No, I've not.
Okay, it's basically cops done with stormtroopers, but they're on Tatooine, and it's like the in between of when Luke leaves home and then comes back.
Okay. Cool.
You can YouTube it. I'm sure it's up there. And that was the first real fan film that ever was made. And guys that started the 501st made it. So they've got effects that still hold up today and their suits. But that's when things started to emerge. And I'm like, other people are doing this. I could do it. I could make a fan film. But it didn't just start with one movie. And I figured, all right, I'm going to make this like a TV show, about 15, 20, about 20, 25 minutes long. And I started with one. And then I'm like, okay, I fleshed that out. Well, let me rephrase that. I thought I fleshed it out. Because I'd never written anything in my life. Nor was I a story person. Just to be clear, I'm a math major, okay? So you know where I'm coming from. I wrote this script, and I was like, all right, but I see it as a trilogy. Like I said, having never written anything before, I'm like, one movie's not enough. Let's make it a trilogy. So I kind of wrote the second movie. I really started getting ideas. Well, actually, what happened was I started writing the second movie, but that was really the third movie. So I moved that aside. So we're working on the second one. Long story short, what has it been, 10 years, I guess? 10, 11 years later.
He's almost done with the filming.
We're almost done. We've got a couple shots left to do. Like I said, by the time this airs, we'll probably finish the principal photography. we will have a full-blown trailer. It's a mini trilogy. Each one's about 20-25 minutes long. Now, I'm going to be honest. The effects are not going to be what you're expecting from current films. But, oddly enough, they're going to be on par with the original trilogy film effects. And we're talking a low-budget film.
Yes, keep that in mind. For those of you who will one day watch it and judge it harshly, it's very low budget.
It's low budget, but here's the other thing, too. This film was not just something that I kind of said, hey, I'm going to do this. Hunter was a huge part of this as well. In fact, I wrote his part kind of for him, knowing that he was going to play it. We both played two Jedi. I was the master, he was the apprentice. And that kind of became a big bonding experience for us because, that, like I said, we kind of like, our friendship kind of jump-started with Star Wars. We were huge fans all the way through the prequels and still. And so the film project became something where, and honestly, it's just kind of took...
You both got to embrace that passion.
We did. We got to embrace the passion, but I learned so much since then. I learned from Andrew and from a couple of books how to write an effective screenplay. I learned how to direct. I learned how to act. I learned
how to edit.
How to edit. I've learned how to do costumes that can look effective as far as what you want to convey on the cheap. Now I'm running the drama program at the school that I work at. I would not have been able to do that had I not done the film. There's so much about where I'm currently at. Even with teaching, when they talk to us about just the basic idea of kind of getting your plan together, take your standards, make your test first because that's the end goal, then work from there. Well, in script writing, you start with, know where you're starting, know where you're ending, fill in the middle, You got to know the end of your film before you can write it because it's like a journey. You got to know where you're going to end up before you can even start to go there. I learned so much from that experience, and now, it's hard for me to be able to sit and watch it sometimes because Hunter died last year. And it was, of course, he had his kind of timing where he went before we were done filming. Would have been nice if he'd waited till after we were done. But no, he didn't. But I think it's been the right kind of therapy for me, just sitting and editing and watching him. And there are so many moments we caught in film where, like, you know what? That's just classic Hunter right there. Some of his great comedic bits and just things and just outtakes and stuff. And it really is. It became a passion for us. I wouldn't have done that if it weren't for him pulling me into Star Wars. I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been for Phantom Menace. I know there's a lot of people that really discredit it, but look, it made me a fan. It gave me a passion to do something with a friend, which helped me in the end. How can I not love a film that's done that, Yeah, sure, it might have its flaws, but every film has its flaws,
Mm-hmm.
You like it, or don't. Those are kind of your options with a movie. You either like it or you don't, You can like it a lot or just like it, but you're still liking it, So for me, the introduction to Star Wars really began with Phantom Menace. There was a very, very slow kind of emerging, like, hey, this is kind of here, but it really didn't kick in until Phantom Menace. Actually, I would say that my introduction to Star Wars is a lot like the marketing for Man of Steel. Because think about it, last summer we had a very nonchalant teaser trailer where we didn't even know it was Superman until the very end. That was kind of how it was in the very beginning. You get the slow build, okay, we're getting an additional trailer. But it wasn't until that action trailer that a lot of people got on board with, that third trailer, that people got a lot on board with it. So that was kind of the Phantom Menace for me. So that's kind of my deal. And, I'm proudly wearing, just a quick plug, just because it's an awesome story. The t-shirt that I'm currently wearing is a Savage Oppressed t-shirt. I'll show Phil so he can give a review. This t-shirt, a few years ago, I know I found it on the Force of the Net, but they were only doing this promotion through fan sites. They had cut 3 episodes of the Clone Wars TV show together to form a little mini-movie. It was what they call the Night Sisters trilogy, dealt with Asajj and the creation of Savage Press and that sort of thing. They did a free screening out in Atlantic Station, in Atlanta. and they were giving out 2 free tickets, and all you had to do was like put in your email account or something. I don't remember. So I got 2 free tickets. I was like, all right, if we're gonna do this, we're doing this right. We got in full Jedi gear. I made sure I had the evening off so I could go. We got down there. We were basically ushered into the theater by members of the 501st. It was a full deal, man. I mean, we got to see this little mini movie of Clone Wars on the big screen with a bunch of Star Wars fans, and at the end, we all got a free T-shirt and a free poster. And so this shirt has some real sentimental meaning for me because that was one of the few things I got to do with Hunter that was Star Wars related. So, and the last thing I got to do with him was go see Phantom Menace in 3D. So, Star Wars, yeah, it probably is just a movie to most people, but to me it's kind of became something that helped forge a friendship. And really kind of pulled me into something I never would have thought of doing, making any kind of a movie, 15 years ago. But, because of the experience that I had and what really drew me in it sucked me in like a freaking tractor beam, And
also in a roundabout way made you grow as a person.
It did. So I kind of in a way found my Death Star maybe.
Well, that was a very long but very passionate description. I'm going to go last because I have probably the least amount to say. So Phil, the floor is yours. How did you get introduced to Star Wars?
All right. Well, I can say that I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater when it came out during the original run, and I look back and I think, whoa, dude, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I was 6 years old when I saw it, and I say, like, really? Like, 30 years? What the hell?
It doesn't feel that far ago, does it?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and
Phil from Philly. Sorry.
And,
like you've never heard that
I know. I got it out of my system. We're done.
Yeah. And my dad took me.
Nice.
And I remember, and I think that was my first experience, my direct experience actually watching Star Wars, because in school, all the kids, they had the Darth Vader figures and the Kenner sets and all that stuff.
So you were aware of it, but...
we were talking about Darth Vader, but I didn't, I wasn't able to really quantify, okay, what exactly is all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so I saw the Ewoks, I saw C-3PO getting torn to bits by the lizard puppet, I saw, Vader being unmasked, I saw Leia in the, in the bikini, although I was too young to really appreciate that. All these things.
That's okay.
Yeah. And then, that was one of the very first movies I ever saw. And probably the first movie, one of the first 1 or 2 movies I remember seeing in the theater and being able to remember it.
Yeah.
There are a couple of others like Dark Crystal and Tootsie.
That's an interesting collage of movies right there.
I can point out the theater, in northern Philadelphia where it is. I've been there again. I know exactly where all this stuff is.
Yeah.
And then later on, we had cable and HBO. And if you were to come to my house in a typical afternoon in the 80s, on HBO I probably have on Back to the Future or Temple of Doom or maybe Howard the Duck or Empire Strikes Back.
But to be fair, I saw Howard the Duck when I was a kid too.
I don't remember that movie being so bad. Maybe it's just because I was a kid.
I think it's because you were a kid and you didn't understand a lot of it. Like, I'm the same way. Like,
yeah.
I saw it when I was a kid because I'm like, oh, it's Howard the Duck. The only thing I can really remember is like the very end where the guy's getting like in the alien and all creepy and stuff. I was like, oh, that's kind of scary. But then when you go back and you check out the Nostalgia Critic review, you're like, how did I miss this? This is definitely not for kids.
Well, in Spaceballs, I mean, I saw, Star Wars Memories. I saw Spaceballs in the theater when it came out. In fact, I saw it twice when I was a kid. Spaceballs was the best movie ever. So I was 10 when I saw that when it came out. And half the jokes in that movie I didn't even get.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I go back and think, oh, that joke's not for kids. Oh, that joke's not for kids either. You know?
Yeah, but it glazes over you when you're a kid.
Yeah, but anyway, in the 80s, HBO, I mainlined Empire Strikes Back again and again and again and again. And when I was a kid, I thought, this movie is really sad and depressing and dark. The ending is kind of a bummer, but there was definitely, I could also sense there was a real texture and a quality to it. And I thought, wow. I mean, I knew even though it was a sad film, that it was a good film. And then I saw Return of the Jedi again. I guess HBO, okay, now we'll put Return of the Jedi on. And then I thought, this is such a much more fun and bright and happy movie.
Yeah.
And for the long time, I liked Jedi more than Empire Strikes Back. But then, now there's no contest. Empire Strikes Back, in my mind, is the best.
Well, think about it. I mean, as you were growing as a person, you were realizing, this one's really, I don't find it as interesting because you're at a different point in your life. It's interesting how, as you get older, you find yourself liking things either more or less than you previously did, just because of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw Phantom Menace in the theater when it came out, and I saw it 2 more times, and I didn't like it as much as the originals, but still, I liked it, and I didn't come in with the, I thought it was kind of slow. I thought it was a little stiff. But I didn't go into it with the preconceptions of this movie totally sucks that somehow got built into it.
Right.
And likewise, it wasn't until a year or 2 afterwards that so I'm supposed to hate this movie?
Yeah.
Okay, it had its flaws, but it's so Jar Jar Binks talks like a Jamaican, thus it's the most terrible movie ever made. It's I think the reaction to it was kind of overblown. Either it's the second coming of Christ, or it's absolutely terrible. And fandom allows no in between with anything.
Yeah.
I saw Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith in the theaters, of course, and I saw each of those multiple times in a theater, and I like those a lot more than the Phantom Menace. So, not a whole lot else to say.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I thought for a second there I thought I had a question, but I guess I didn't. I'll come back to it if I think of it.
All right, so I suppose it's my turn?
Yep.
Alrighty. The first time I saw anything Star Wars, and this is a very early memory, I have no idea how old I was, but I know that it must have been at a point where the first Star Wars film, A New Hope, was on TV at some point.
Okay.
Probably a pay-per-view channel, I'm not really sure. I just remember the first scene of Star Wars I ever saw was of C-3PO. He's on, it's near the beginning where he's in the desert and he's going, "Hey, over here, help!" I remember seeing that, and I remember that very clearly. That's what I saw. And wherever it was, I was also not at home at the time. And so when we, some time passes, and I eventually find it again. I'm like, oh wait, I recognize this. This is the guy. That's that gold thing. It was in the desert. I should watch this. And I finally
that gold thing in the desert.
I didn't know what it was.
No, I know. I find it rather interesting that you remember that actually.
Well, it was like I had no concept of a droid or anything at all of what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, my very first experience with Star Wars was with A New Hope. And I won't say it was a instant love, but it was definitely like, hey, I like this. It's got stuff that I can, as I said, I don't remember exactly how old I was at this point. But I definitely liked it. So much so that, I eventually saw, I didn't see the Empire Strikes Back. I think I saw them out of order as well. So I saw the first one, didn't see Empire Strikes Back, and then saw Return of the Jedi. So there was a gap. At least I think I saw most of it. But then, when I really got into it and finally got to see them all in a row, is when they released them for the first time as a pack on VHS.
Yeah.
where they had the collectors, like, and it wasn't the special edition. It was just the normal, here are the movies.
Yeah, this is before the special editions came out.
So this was before the special editions, which are now the standards, I guess. Because you really can't find the old versions in much anymore unless you search online, I suppose.
Because they kind of don't exist.
I still have those VHSs, by the way.
Well, you're talking about the VHS, yeah.
But that's when I finally got to see them all in a row. Yes?
Oh, I was just gonna say, mark my words. Now that Disney owns Lucas and Disney knows that there's a market for those, I give a couple years for the rights worked out. The originals, as we remember them, they will come back.
Yeah. Well, and there's what's his name? Sam Witwer. He plays I forget. I think the character's name is Aiden. He's a vampire on the show Being Human. He also did the voice of Star Killer in the Force Unleashed games. And he also does the voice of Darth Maul in Clone Wars. He's been on the Forcecast, or now Rebel Force Radio, multiple times, and he said it's like, look, keep the up-to-date versions as the finalized versions, but have the originals in, like, somewhere as a historical document, basically. Because, that's what really changed a lot of cinema. It's like, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If nothing else, because of the history, because it really did make so many breakthroughs and created so much of cinema and entertainment, really. So I can at least understand that. And I think Disney, like you said, Phil, I think Disney knows there's a market for it. There's a good historical reason to do it. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't,
I read that the only thing holding that back is certain rights things that'll supposedly be worked out in a couple years.
Yeah,
I think.
Because that's one of those touchy time periods where because it was 20th Century Fox that owned them or something. So,
but. And they're Fox.
They are Fox. They don't want to give up X-Men or Spider-Man, so they're Fox.
So I remember watching those over and over and over again quite a bit. And that's how I got into it. And not only did I get into it, but ended up helping get another friend into Star Wars because he had no idea what they were either. And we eventually went and saw The Phantom Menace. And I'm among one of those people that if I see a movie in theaters, I'll know if I didn't like it or not, if I have any desire to see it again.
Makes sense.
Like, I won't be able to tell you right off the bat, like, as soon as I walk out, whether I liked it or not. Usually it's like, oh, yeah, it was good, because, it entertained me.
Yeah.
Very rarely have I ever gone into a theater and be like, this is utter trash.
Yeah.
I think maybe once or twice has that ever happened. And I don't even remember which movies they were.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it takes a little while to seep in if whether or not I really like it and want to see it again. Phantom Menace, while there were certainly parts of it I definitely like, I have to say that it was not a favorite of mine. That's definitely a movie that I could probably never see again and be happy. I'll not avoid it. If someone's like, hey, you want to watch this? I'm not going to be like, no, never, ever, again. Die to you, death to you for suggesting a thing. No, I'll watch it if it's on, and I've got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
And I can stomach Jar Jar now.
Yeah.
But Clone Wars I really liked.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I mean, again, there's definitely parts that I could skip. In fact, the last time I watched that movie, I did skip bits of it. It's like, okay, this is the unwatchable part.
I'm laughing because I know what he's talking about, and I have a completely different reaction to it, which is funny.
That's the thing.
But it's interesting.
Film and art is subjective.
Oh, yeah, it is. But, just like we talked about on the last episode, it's because what is in a movie is what you take with you. And if you have, everyone has different experiences, so we're going to respond to scenes different ways. So.
Plus,
wait, so you said Clone Wars. Did you mean Attack of the Clones?
I believe you did.
Attack of the Clones, sorry.
Okay.
I would just kind of refer to it as Clone Wars because, they refer to it in A New Hope as the Clone Wars.
Yeah, except that's a TV show, but
yeah.
that's okay.
Whatever.
I usually just call it Episode 2 so people know what I'm talking about.
You guys are nerds.
Yeah, we are.
I am too, so... And then by the time we get to Phantom Menace...
You mean
Revenge of the Sith. Sorry, I'm getting them all confused now, as I often do. And by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, I think it's when they finally got back into the somewhat stride of, okay, oh yeah, we're making Star Wars. We should get on that. I did see Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith more than once in theaters. I did not see it more than once. Phantom Menace more than once, although I did go to a midnight showing.
Nice.
Which was surprisingly not as packed and crazy as we were expecting it to be, because that movie had hype like long before it came out. That was like the first time I ever heard of people were camping out in front of the theater to ensure that they were going to see this movie.
Well, I think, at least in what I've noticed in recent years, at the time the idea of a midnight showing was not as popular. Yes, and what made it well known then was the people camping out, was the people doing these crazy things. We're going to get in line the day before. No, the week before. And then for Revenge of the Sith, 4 months before. And we're like, seriously, people.
Forget it. No.
I'm okay with the day before, because then it becomes this big tailgating party for the show. That's fine. That's as much as you should do. Okay? If you're able to take a couple days off of work, you want to camp out the day before, you got a bunch of friends, there's a big to-do at that particular theater, and there's a bunch of people doing it, go for it. It's like tailgating before a sporting event. Go for it.
It's a big social party.
Exactly.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
But when you start to do more than that, then it just becomes kind of, it's like, really, I don't think you really need to spend 7 days tailgating for an event, It just seems overkill at that point.
I was just thinking, like, the way I see it is what is your cash value of time? And if you don't have anything else to do, you want to camp out with friends for the theater, okay. But if you're with the same kind of thing, like camping out in front of Best Buy a few days before Thanksgiving, okay, you're going to save $300 on a TV, but is that worth
If you don't buy the TV, you'll save even more money.
Plus, it's like, I guess it's like if you have the time and not a job to go and camp out in front of a store for a couple days.
Yeah.
Should you really be spending $300?
I can think of a lot of places to camp, and in front of a theater or in front of a store is not one of them.
And really, like, unless you're handing out the cure to anything, like the surefire cure for, like, cancer or something, there's no way I'm going to camp out in front of your place for 4 months. No way in the world.
Yeah.
And I don't even like camping.
So really, the only way you'll get Andrew to go camping is if you have the cure for cancer.
Pretty much. I mean, I could probably make up some situations where I could be persuaded to go camping, but they'd have to be very good reasons.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, that's, as I said, kind of my least interesting and least long-winded of the three tales. Although I do remember playing Star Wars, not the video games, but actually going outside and playing Star Wars quite a bit with my friends.
Yeah, especially when your friend here kind of ripped you into his movie.
Well, that was before that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, there was one. This is related, but it doesn't start out as related. We were playing a game of Manhunt during the day, so it's just the more adult way of saying hide and go seek. That's what all that Manhunt is. And so I had a really good hiding spot, and I ended up being the last one to be found. So much so that they were questioning the people who were found, like, well, where is he? And at one point, one of my friends goes, "You will tell me where the rebel scum is." and at that point, I had when I had heard that they were still looking for me, I'd actually gone this is the best hiding spot ever. I'm not going to get caught here. I'm going to leave this hiding spot and go somewhere else. That way I can come back to this hiding spot and do this again. So I had gotten to a point where I could actually overhear this conversation, and when I heard that line, I could not resist. So I immediately grabbed a stick and went, "For the rebellion!" and charged at him.
That's awesome.
And then that ended up spawning a whole new game of Star Wars Manhunt, where we were all different characters of Star Wars characters.
And then that later got called Order 66.
So it was, and none of us had the toys either. Not a single one of us for the longest time had any Star Wars toys. I don't think I ever got Star Wars toys now that I think about it.
I just realized I didn't either, actually.
Well, you had at least Lego.
But not until I was in high school, not until they came out with them. I mean, we're talking I was 17 by the time I finally got them.
So, when I say, we were playing Star Wars, it was literally with, sticks and, our fingers to be blasters. So it was literally just our imagination alone. But we made it work, and it was fun. That also helps the fact that I am a fan of Star Wars, because it's a definitely strong and emotional, positive point in my childhood of, hey, that's part of that imagination process that those movies help spawn and nurture.
Oh yeah.
That allows these people to go on and create these fan films that, are so funny or so creative.
Or it's not just fan films, but I mean Grant Imahara from MythBusters. Okay, he worked on the R2 units for Episode 1 because he was a Star Wars fan. He got into engineering and robotics because he was a Star Wars fan.
Well, the whole MythBuster crew is a big Star Wars fan.
Well, yeah, but that's my point. It's like it's not just fan films, but Star Wars has inspired people to write music. There's actually a number of bands that they do nothing but play Star Wars songs. Like they write songs, and you can hear it on Forcecast or Rebel Force Radio on their what do they call it? Something musical thing.
Well, also it's not.
They have a musical episode every year.
I bet you, if you talk to any person who's into the costuming, the makeup, the special effects, like the monster effects, that sort of thing,
Oh, yeah.
I would say 9 times out of 10 they said, I saw Star Wars and wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So
Huge-
it's just
huge
inspired
draw.
that creative motive, like, that's the thing of which I want to be a part of somehow.
And I will tell you, one of the greatest things about the Star Wars universe is the fact that it kind of never ends. Like, I mean, you look at, I can remember, like, gearing up for Phantom Menace, okay, we were aware of Hoth and Endor and Tatooine and Cloud City, and I think that was part of why it wasn't as drawn into the original trilogies, because it didn't feel like this galaxy, because it was a lot of people. I mean, realistically, if you look at the ratio of humans to aliens in the original trilogy, there's a lot more humans and very few aliens. In the prequels, there's a lot more aliens, and so it feels otherworldly. The original trilogy never really felt otherworldly to me because, okay, we got Chewie. He's a dog. No big deal. Okay, we see Greedo for like 2 seconds. And even in the aliens in the cantina, it didn't feel like aliens to me. Like, a couple of them just have like messed up faces. One we like to call Buttface, because that's what they called the character, I think. I don't know. I just remember there's like Ponda Baba we used to call Buttface, which oddly enough is what Mark Hamill and company used to call him on set because they didn't have names.
Well, that's why Hammerhead is named Hammerhead.
Yeah, because like, he looks like he's got a hammer for a head. Hammerhead, we'll call him that.
There's Snaggletooth and
but the Senate,
Three-Toed Willie.
But the Senate, all the different aliens, so you get such a rich, almost ever expanding. Because then in Episode 1 you get Naboo and Coruscant, 2 new planets, and then you got Geonosis and Camino, and just there's ever expanding planets, and so it felt, Star Wars is such a rich universe of which you can pull from inspiration, and even create new things like Kagonians and Drazels. And you can go ahead and make your own Gotham planet.
Oh, Drazels, 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 I made them out of clay.
In the Senate in Phantom Menace, if you freeze frame it, there are ETs.
Yes, there are. There are ETs, and there's something
I did
else.
not know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, wow. That's what happens when you don't watch the movie more than once.
Well,
there's a lot of Easter eggs. There's a lot of... That's actually what's really, really weird is having gone back recently and actually, watched the prequels, Revenge of the Sith, I'm not sure if it's because they had to have more humor in there to kind of balance the darkness of it. It feels less serious than Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace as a result. Like, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones feel like they're playing themselves much more straightforward, much more, okay, we're here, we're doing this, as opposed to, sometimes it just feels like there's a lot more jokes in Revenge of the Sith. Now, it could just be the fact that the same amount of jokes and humor is there, but because you've got it juxtaposed with such serious dark drama with Anakin's Fallen of Revenge of the Sith, that maybe it just pops out at you more.
I honestly don't remember it being funny. It's been a while, so I guess maybe that's why.
Yeah. I mean, because there's some things where I'm like, okay, that's fun. Why is that funny? Like, the whole fight with Yoda and the Emperor is just like, honestly, I have a hard time watching that because it just comes across as comical sometimes to me.
I don't know.
Because just watching when Palpatine gets like thrown back on the couch, it's like I remember when we saw it in the theaters, we all laughed at it because it was funny. That was an experience, I'll tell you. With Revenge of the Sith, we went to the midnight showing. We got there 3 hours early, which was late. If you're gonna go to a Star Wars midnight showing, you got to be there like 6 hours early.
I saw that at midnight as well.
Were you in Atlanta at the time?
Yeah, I don't know, but no, I was still in. That was before grad school. I was
okay,
in Dallas.
so okay.
Yeah. Just thinking. Yeah, I know. Yeah, Anakin's slaughtering younglings. That's hilarious, man.
Yeah, no. Well, that's why I'm sitting here thinking it's like maybe those certain comical things pop out at me more because, like I said, if they're juxtaposed with the darkness of it, sometimes that can be, you're noticing it more because it's the contrast.
Well, hey, Anakin's face melting off because it's a kids movie.
Well, that's why it was rated PG-13. It's actually
Vader at the end yelling, "No!" I mean, that was kind of funny. Maybe not for the reasons Lucas intended.
Yeah.
I was probably one of the few people that didn't have a problem with that, but, now it's like, okay, it's apparently funny, I guess. Whatever.
Well, it was a little over the top, even for Star Wars.
It might have been, but, I just remember, at the time, nobody had a problem with it in theater, so it's kind of like, well, if I don't have a problem with it, it's one of those things, if you don't have a problem with it and somebody else does, you're kind of like, why? This is, but,
I think it's because it was so, we were so used to hearing Vader talk the way he does in the other movies. The fact that he had this big outburst was so out of normal, what we're used to. It's still within character in terms of that's where he's coming from.
Yeah, because it's not really the Vader we know.
No.
It's not the Vader from the original trilogy.
No, so just the fact that we have the Vader voice say that line, it just sounds off.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly understand that.
Would be my explanation as to why it's so straight. That's the point where we pinpoint. We're like, that's the funny part of the movie.
Yeah.
That's the thing we have to mock and make a meme out of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The meme.
So now that we've gotten through our introduction of how we were involved in the Star Wars, we have a new topic to get to, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Because none of this would happen if George Lucas was able to get the rights to Flash Gordon.
Flash.
And here's the thing, okay? Now I've got resources that I'm going to be pulling from. I'm not going to be reading it word for word. This is a 300-page, probably 5-pound book in my hands right now called The Making of Star Wars about A New Hope. We're going to... But, like I said, I'm going to hit the high points, okay?
And now Matthew will be reading from the Book of Wars, chapter star. Verse Greedo. And he said unto Han,
unto Utu Butu Solo. Una buta solo. Son bitale. So yeah, if that doesn't tell you I'm a fan, I can quote Greedo. That's also proof that I do enjoy the originals. Actually, I don't have a particular favorite. They're kind of like my kids. Honestly, I like one better than another at any random point. It just kind of depends.
Star Wars Cantina. Sorry, I had to make sure. I had to work that in somehow.
Yeah. Anyway, so George Lucas, by this point, he had done THX 1138, which at the time wasn't quite as received because that was more of a student film, and people were like, oh, this is different. We don't know what to do with this. We don't know how to take this because, this is late 60s, early 70s. And weren't exactly ready for experimental films that were actually doing cool stuff.
Have either of you seen that movie?
I have not.
I've seen it.
How is it? I've not seen it either.
It's worth seeing. Definitely check out his special edition, which came out 2004. That's when I saw on DVD, where he's like with Star Wars, he throws in some CGI, but I think it's very seamless. It doesn't.
It probably enhances those shots to make it feel the way it should.
It does. It does. I mean, it feels right. it sticks to the same look and feel, and I didn't find it jarring at all. Definitely see that.
Okay, cool. I have to put that on the list.
Yes. So he had made THX. It wasn't exactly a...
The audience is now deaf.
Thank you. Which now you know where the name comes from. It came to the first movie he made. And then he actually, as a kind of a stick it to you to Francis Ford Coppola, because George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, and Steven Spielberg were all really like best friends in film school. So Francis said, you know what, I bet you can't make a straight up comedy. And George is like, I'll see you and raise you American Graffiti. So we did. And the way that George said, he just kind of made it about himself and his life. And he's like, look, it doesn't really have a specific story. It's just following these different characters around. But one of the things that came out of American Graffiti was Harrison Ford. But after that, he's like, all right, I grew up on the old Flash Gordon serials because they would come on reruns on TV. He's like, I really love them. It's like the kind of the space opera, the kind of the swashbucklers of the stars sort of feeling he got, and you got your bad guy, clear bad guys versus good guys, and all. It's like, I want to make that, but with better special effects so people actually enjoy it. It doesn't become just this kind of hokey thing it was. Like, we really need to be good. And there's really nothing for kids, because you're talking the mid to late 70s. He's like, movies around here are very depressing. They're apocalyptic, and there's nothing for kids to really grab a hold to and get inspired by.
Was he planning on making Flash Gordon serials himself, or just a Flash Gordon movie straight up?
He was going to make a Flash... Well, the thing is, here's the thing, okay? There's a reason why it's Episode 4, Episode 5, Episode 6, 1, 2, 3. George loves serialized storytelling. That's why after the originals, he went on to produce the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. That's why he was pretty much... Okay, yeah, there was an executive, like a artistic director with Dave Filoni on Clone Wars. George pretty much ran the show with Clone Wars. George loves serialized storytelling. The idea of, okay, let's take our time and tell a story. Instead of just trying to hash it out in 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever, let's take our time and really, build it and set everything up and just, tell the story over time, but, it's still a confined amount of time. So he wanted to make, I mean, the thing is, he was such a huge fan of the Flash Gordon series, like, let's make that. Let's make Flash Gordon, but on the big screen, but better, and where people get excited by it, and they have, all this. George was also a huge fan of racing. He's a huge race fan. Not in terms of, like, NASCAR. No, George is like, I'm pretty sure George Lucas would be like, yeah, who wants to see people make left turns all day? He's talking about race cars where, they make the laps around, it's like 3 laps, like Monaco racing, that sort of thing. Like actual, like, what's it called? I want to say like Indy 500 racing.
Okay.
Where it's like around a lengthy course and all this. He's basically, if it was fast, he was on it. He was there. He grew up basically a grease monkey working on his car. He's a hot rod kind of guy. So he liked that idea of, okay, let's make Flash Gordon, but, and I'm going to come back to this, faster and more intense. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know what that is. But he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon. But he had
who owned the rights?
I forget exactly. It was probably, it wasn't 20th Century Fox. I don't exactly know who the rights belonged to. But whatever it was, he wasn't able to get them. I think because, here's the thing, in the time period he was in, the idea of making a decent budgeted, good special effects space movie was honestly just unheard of. Because no one had done it. I mean, the only thing they could, in fact, when a little bit later on when we talk about like people's expectations at the time, you're looking at Planet of the Apes. And
this ain't no Planet of No Apes.
I mean, and stuff like that. It's like, all right, I've seen Planet of the Apes. It's a decent movie. I enjoyed it. But are the special effects that good? Not really. They're okay. But
Logan's Run.
I haven't seen that.
Logan's Run was a quintessential. You should see it. It's good.
Okay.
Quintessential sci-fi movie. Came out in '76.
Okay.
Yeah. And you look at the effects in that movie, and you could tell, oh yeah, that's a model,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. It looks, totally dated, totally a thing of its time. Original Star Wars, it still looks good. It's,
yeah. There's a couple effects that are like, okay, this is just not up to par with today, but yeah, the original effects still hold up as good.
I would say overall, those 3 original movies hold up really well.
Yeah, they do. But
effects-wise,
they do, and that's one of the things that I don't know if I want to touch on or not, but that's one of the things that people give George a lot of crap for. Is like, I just want to let you know right away. This is before we've even talked about the script and all this. That was his main goal right away. Was to give people, because we've talked about this before. It's like when you go to see a movie, as you said, Andrew, you're going to be entertained. Mm-hmm. Well, there's nothing wrong with being entertained by really good special effects. It helps suspend that disbelief. It helps suck you into the universe you're in. And, George said, all right, Flash Gordon is really cool, but it looks really crappy. People are not interested in it because of that. If we can make it look good, we get them into the other stuff. So that was kind of, and another thing I've already established, he said, and kids have nothing to really get inspired by and grab hold to today. So right away, folks, he starts off with, we're taking Flash Gordon, okay, or at least that idea. I want good special effects, and I want kids to really enjoy it. Okay? Because I know there was some flack about the prequels. Guess what? It's been there from the beginning. Just so people are aware. I don't want people saying, oh, it's like, no. It's been there from the beginning. Okay? Flash Gordon was something, and the reason I think he said for kids was because he grew up with Flash Gordon. And when you grow up with something as a kid, you're like, man, kids today just don't have what we had. Well, we say that sometimes. It's like, if kids today just had what we had, they would see the world the way I do. And so he had the mentality of saying, all right, if they had what I had, but better, we're going to make this look better, get them in, we can do it. But he couldn't get the rights, so he began writing what tentatively was called the Journal of the Wills. This is kind of he started having to build a universe. He said, okay, I've got these characters. I want to, it's going to be like Flash Gordon, and, we're going to have spaceships and monsters. Okay, there's this guy called Starkiller. There's General Skywalker. There's Ben Kenobi. There's Darth Vader. By the way, General Skywalker in his original version of The Star Wars, which will be made into a comic later this fall, General Skywalker was not Luke Skywalker. It was General Skywalker and Luke Starkiller and Darth Vader were all 3 separate characters, none related. Mace Windu, the character, was in the original draft of the Star Wars. The planet of Utapau was in the original draft of the Star Wars.
Utapau?
Utapau, which is the sinkhole planet they go to in Revenge of the Sith, where he fights General Grievous.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Didn't remember that one.
Yeah, well, there's so many planets in Revenge of the Sith. It's like, okay, we're on that one. Oh, we're on the lava planet. Okay, we're here. Okay, we're back to Coruscant.
That's kind of how I remember it. Like, okay, that's the bug planet. That's that one.
Yeah, and then they're in the montage of Order 66. You're like, planet. It's like, I know they have names because I'm a nerd. And I read these books. But yeah, and there was one of the planets' name was Organa Major and Organa Minor. By the way, Organa, Princess Leia's last name. Bail Organa, and then Leia Organa. So he kept a lot of the names, but the story changed. The original, and I'm sure, this thing went through so many script revisions, and look, I'd love to sit here and talk about them, but honestly,
we'd be here
go
even
buy
longer.
the book, The Making of Star Wars. The paperback version is only like $35. It is well worth it. It does a great job. I mean, it's got copies of the manuscripts that George wrote. And you're reading this stuff and you're like, wow, this is so imaginative and just getting everything down. Here, Journal of the Wills 1. This is a story of Mace Windu, a revered Jedi Bendu of Opuchi as related to us by C.J. Thorne, Padawan learner to the famed Jedi. That was just a quick blurb to show you that his original concept was so expansive, just in terms of like I mean, it really was a galactic event.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he had this. I mean, and that's just it. I mean, it was a galactic event. I mean, he had to go from planet to planet, all the stuff happening.
And he really had to narrow it down to get the story, I guess.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, as I read through this, I'm like, wow, we got such a watered down, simple version of this. Like, I'd rather have the other one almost, just because it's, and not to say that there's anything wrong with A New Hope. It's a great film, and the story we got is great. But when you read through, like, why did you, and then you start to understand it's because of limitations. George had this great, just expansive universe, an expansive galactic tale, and you had the good versus evil and everything, but he couldn't do it. Technology was not available for him to do it. So he had to start scaling back. At the same time, he was reading a lot of Joseph Campbell, primarily The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And he said, all right, I'm having trouble...
Hero's Journey.
Yeah, Hero's Journey. He said, all right, I'm having some trouble pinning down the story, but there were some things that were starting to take shape. Like, okay, now we introduced Han Solo and Chewbacca. Han Solo, before the, I guess, the final version of the script, was a green-scaled alien with gills. Basically, think Greedo, but with scales, and that would have been Han Solo.
Yeah.
The Luke Skywalker, at one point, the Luke Skywalker character and the Han Solo character were one person. They were the same character. There wasn't a trilogy, it was two characters. It was Skywalker, which, if you see images of the Skywalker character, let me see if I can flip to it real quick. It's actually going to look very similar to George Lucas. The Adventures of Starkiller, that was another, it went through many script revisions, and it's just so many different things, and not only that, but I mean, you're talking about something where, like I said in the 70s, where, kind of Planet of the Apes, or like you said, Logan's Run, that was the mindset of sci-fi. But the problem was, this wasn't sci-fi George was trying to sell people. It was space fantasy. And no one had really experienced space fantasy before, except for Flash Gordon. But people weren't really interested in that because, like, oh, well, that's some hokey thing they made back in the 40s. So he was trying to, convey these different ideas and things. And finally, oh, here we go. I'm going to show Andrew. And here, I'm going to show you. Can you see this at all, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay. This is from the one version of the Star Wars, where this is the Skywalker, or this is the Star Killer character, I think. So this is your George Lucas look-alike. He's got a cape and a lightsaber. This, I believe, was the Skywalker character. Here's 3PO, here's Han Solo, and here's R2-D2. So you can see the similarities, but the differences as well.
Yeah, so all this original draft of the entire story, this is going to be coming out as a comic?
Yes.
Like a graphic?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to be making a graphic novel of it. I just know it's later this year. I don't know exactly when.
And I'm looking at this
and that includes,
like
Luke Star
right
Killer and Han Solo with scales and...
Yep.
Sweet.
It's just...
I'm in.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. It's like his... like I said, I recommend this book to anyone who's a Star Wars fan, because the story of how Star Wars got made, I would love for them to make a movie of it, but to do a good movie about it, that would be a 6-hour film. There's so much to it. There's just so much. One of the things George had a problem with, though, when he finally got the idea down and he finally got his version, because like I said, he really went to mythology for his story, because he said, okay, this thing is getting too out of hand, I need to pin it down. He finally got a story written. The problem was, it was really long. He said, all right, there's no way I'm going to be able to make this. But let me take the first third and make that into a movie. and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. That long script he had written was the original trilogy. The first third of that original draft became A New Hope.
Cool.
Yeah.
So he pretty much had it written out.
He did.
Right away.
He pretty much did. Now, there were some, I mean, he said, he really focused on that first third. Like, he had the story written out, but not, like, the script pinned down, like, and all scripted out. So he took that first third, scripted that out, and said, okay, let's make this. And it is one of those things. I was listening to Kevin Smith one time, on Film School Fridays, good podcast if you're into filmmaking, listening to people who are in the business talk about their experiences. He talks about how when you're starting off, you got to say, okay, well, what do I have, and how can I use that to make a film? George kind of was in a similar boat where he's like, all right, I have this great idea, but I can only do so much. I need a company that can do nothing but special effects. So he created ILM. Star Wars was budgeted at $8 million. Now, even by today's standards, that is only about $30 million. If we're talking for inflation, okay? So, think of this, folks. Most recently, Iron Man 3, Man of Steel, okay? Huge effects-driven movies. They're budgeted at least $200 million. We're talking $30 million to make a movie of a similar caliber. And not only that, but one where you have to spend half your budget building the computers, because they didn't exist in the 70s. We have to remember, in 1975, 76, there were no iPods. There were no desktops. There were no Apple IIes. They barely had graphing. They didn't even have graphing calculators, from what I understand. They spent half the budget of the film building the computers so they could do the special effects. They had to create a new type of camera called the Dijkstraflex camera that could move on a gimbal to go around the models to create the effects.
Yes. Yes.
I was actually reading online where the studios actually, and I'm going to come back to talk about how George finally got the movie sold. Funny little story I was able to read up on. The guys at ILM were working on the picture, and they were getting shot. They were doing their best to get shots done because George had such a clear vision in his head. And I will tell you, when you have such a clear vision in your head, sometimes it's really, really difficult to convey that vision to other people. Sometimes you're like, look, can't you just do a mind meld with me so we can both understand what's going on? You can just go do it.
It's very hard to get exactly what you see in your head from what you see in your head onto the page and from the page to reality. And that's a hard transition.
And in some cases, unless you shoot it yourself. Because, there were so many challenges to get the film made. Because he had studios turn him down all the time. It wasn't until he went to 20th Century Fox and a guy named Alan Ladd said, you know what? You're a young upcoming filmmaker. I have no idea what this is, but you're very passionate about it. I'll give you. I will greenlight this. One of the things that helped.
Probably one of the best decisions that man ever made.
Yes, it is definitely probably the best decision that man has ever made. Well, just hopefully, picking the right woman to marry might be the better decision. But one of the biggest problems George had was trying to get the movie sold. What he did was, and maybe you're familiar with him, Phil, a man named Ralph McQuarrie. Did landscapes, did concept art, that sort of thing. Have you seen any of the original Ralph McQuarrie concept art?
I don't. Maybe.
Okay, well, it's a good thing I have it with me.
That book you have there, I probably flipped through that. It's in Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
So.
Where's your camera? Okay. Here's the original concept art for the Luke Skywalker Darth Vader fight.
Yes, that looks familiar.
Okay, the only reason that Darth Vader has a breathing mask is because at one point in the script they have a fight in space, like in between two ships. And Ralph was like, well, if he's going to be in space, he needs to be able to breathe in space, so he needs a mask.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Darth Vader has a mask. Because Ralph McQuarrie gave him a mask because it was originally in the script that they were going to fight, like, in the middle of space between two ships. Because he didn't know, they're going to, like, have a thing and, you know, it's going to be an enclosed space between two ships. Ralph did a concept art. Here, I can show this one to you. That's C-3PO and R2. Now, I find it very, very ironic. It's almost like he planned it, even though I know he didn't. That the first image that Andrew saw that made him aware of Star Wars was C-3PO in the desert. Because that image I just showed you is what hooked Anthony Daniels into playing C-3PO. Because he said, I saw this image and I'm like, he said, I mean, you can find clips of him on YouTube or in any kind of special features of him talking about it. He said, I saw that image and I saw that character and it's as if he was saying, come with me and let us embark on this journey and adventure, this world of fantasy. And it's just...
I think it's really cool how, I think it's really cool how, like, a lot of the concepts, you know, that we know, the story elements, the character elements that we know of Star Wars, you know, they were, Lucas, you know, he planned them, but they didn't come out exactly as they expected. A lot of that was kind of by accident or an iterative process.
Exactly.
Of, you know,
And in some cases it wasn't just that, it was the fact that, I mean, George has always needed a concept artist to convey his idea. And in some cases, you know, he ended up with something he liked better because, you know, an artist, you know, takes, you know, their interpretation of what George is telling him, draws it out, and George's gonna be like, that's awesome, I never thought of that. You know, like the breathing mask with Vader, you know. George wouldn't have thought of that. But it stuck, and it became something that is identifiable with the character of Darth Vader. So he had these concept images, the Luke Skywalker Darth Vader fight, the C-3PO with R2 in the desert, and I think there was another one. Here's concept art of the cantina / the docking bay outside the cantina.
Mm-hmm.
And he had these with him, and so he's like, all right, I can't really easily convey it, so I need art. I need art to show you what it's going to be. And at least those three took it, and that's what got Alan Ladd to actually say, all right, I have no idea what it is, but you're passionate about it, and those looks cool, so we'll go with it. But like I said, the challenges of getting the movie made were very, very daunting. Once they finally got the movie cast, now here's an interesting part. If you ever get a chance to listen to, Fat Man on Batman with Kevin Smith, the interview he does with Mark Hamill, anytime you get to listen to Mark Hamill talk, oh man, I love it. Because he has such great stories. He really is. He has such great stories because he grew up in like a kind of a theater family, that sort of thing, so he's all in it. But when he talks about what drew him into doing the role as Luke, he said, I read through the script and it's like, man, there's so much humor in this. Like, if nobody likes this, at least it'll become a cult favorite just because of the humor. And I find it very interesting because it's like, I guess, I don't really find A New Hope, like, terribly funny, but then again, there's a lot of that's what she said jokes you can make when you watch A New Hope.
Well, A New Hope, A New Hope, you know, that movie was made on the seat of its pants. It was, you know, like they were running against very tight constraints.
Tight constraints.
That kind of shows. Yeah, I know. It's a very scrappy, soulful movie because Lucas. I mean, I could tell, like, the crew themselves, they themselves are forced, okay, we really got to put our hearts and souls into this, and I contend it actually is a pretty damn funny movie. But the humor doesn't overwhelm the plot. The movie is not a comedy. It's just, it's very light in its feet. Someone get this walking carpet out of our way.
That's just it.
We'll be thinner. You know.
Well, and Lucas himself has said, it's like, the movies are serious, but they don't take themselves seriously. And I think that's right. and I will tell you, having gone, you know, with my own films, you know, rewriting the different versions, there was at one point where Andrew looked and said, there's no humor in it. You got to have some humor in it to feel like Star Wars. And it kind of dawned on me, and I went back and watched, and I can't tell you how many times I watched all the films and studied them and looked at different things.
It took that one comment to be like, hey, you're missing something.
Well, because this is part of the reason you helped me grow as a writer. Because I got so focused on just telling the story, I forgot, hey, you need this element of humor to bring out the fun. That's one of the things that Star Wars had, and, it drew Mark Hamill in to do it. Carrie Fisher just, like, at the time was like, oh, it's a job, and Harrison Ford kind of had the, I don't know if you've ever heard the joke on the Forcecast or Rebel Force Radio is Harrison Ford's greatest, like, emotion is, who cares? Because he honestly didn't want to do it. Like, George didn't even want to cast him. He's like, I don't want to use Harrison because I've used him before and people are going to recognize him from American Graffiti. I want somebody new. Kurt Russell was actually auditioned for Han Solo. And there was a couple other people. But it's so, like, like I said, the story of how Star Wars got made is, like, it's so fascinating. You know how Peter Mayhew got the role of Chewbacca?
Because he was tall.
Exactly. He stood up and George looked and said, you're in.
Didn't he work in a hospital?
Yes, he did. He worked in a hospital. And I guess, and his agent said, hey, they're looking for tall people, or somebody said, they're looking for tall people, and Peter, you'd be great because you're like 7'5". Go check this Star Wars thing out. And Peter honestly didn't really know what to, I mean, that's just it. It's like now today, it's so hard for us to comprehend a time period without Star Wars because it's permeated everything and it's inspired so many things. But at the time, they thought it was stupid. There were a few people that thought, hey, this is really something. But honestly, even Alec Guinness thought it was stupid. Like, he didn't take it, I mean, he kind of said, all right, look, I'll play it, I'll do this because it's a mentor role, but that's the only reason. He thought it was stupid. And not only that, but this is also at a time where if you're a actor and you're a well-respected actor, especially a British actor, you're not going to be cut dead in a kids movie because a kids movie at the time was crappy. It wasn't something that you were going to be respected for. So he's like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Fine, whatever. At least I'm a mentor role. It's something I can say, hey, I've done. And, he at least on his part, did that move justice. But, he was the one that actually suggested his character die at the end for dramatic effect. And that's which is why Obi-Wan comes back as a Force Ghost, because George is like, I still need Obi-Wan for 2 and 3, because he has to talk to Luke. Force Ghost. That's what we'll call it. Because, it's one of those things, like, the different I say collaboration, but George had such a hard time. He actually developed hypertension during the making of Star Wars.
Well,
so he had to check himself to the hospital.
Sick during the desert shoot?
Oh, yeah. The desert shoot was... You thought our shoot was rough. The desert shoot for them was horrendous. The 3PO suit kept breaking apart as Anthony was trying to walk. The R2 unit wouldn't move because sand would get in the gears and everything. It's just, there's just so many things that were problem. I mean, you're talking, by the way, do you know where the planet name of Tatooine comes from?
No.
The city name of Tatooine in Tunisia, where it was filmed.
Okay.
So if you want to go to Tatooine, you just go to Tatooine.
Cool.
Considering I never ever wanted to go to a desert.
Well, me neither, but I think primarily of the the Lars homestead. When they're on that set, they're actually at least in the interior and all that. That's actually in the town of Tatooine. But why do they use a desert planet? Because like George is like, what looks spacey? Desert. That's why they use a desert planet. There were some really, let's face it. Star Wars Episode 4 is a low-budget fan film. It is. But George pushed himself. He had a vision, and he said, all right, we're not going to be able to sell people on these great things. In fact, it's actually funny. In an interview he did with Christopher Nolan, Chris was asking him about, what made you do this? He's like, You know, Chris, I figured if a shot didn't work, we'd just throw up a big flash and a bang effect, and we'd hope they wouldn't notice. I mean, it really was. It's like, it really is kind of funny. It's like, you know, me kind of looking at it from the filmmaker's perspective, and as, you know, like I said, a huge fan of all the films. I look and I go, you know, this is a good film. Don't get me wrong. But do people really know how, like, this could have been done better had George been given the resources he was really allowed to have. Because he had such a great vision for it. And that's part of the reason why he did the special editions. Because when he went to remaster them in the 90s, his producer said, you know, George, you've got the tools now. You can make these films the way you wanted them to be back in the day when you couldn't make them the way you wanted them to be. And it really wasn't, I mean, honestly, the Jabba scene didn't really fit. It doesn't matter whether they've been able to do the effect or not. It doesn't really fit. But, you know, you look at Tatooine, you look at Mos Eisley when they're at the spaceport. You look at the original. It's kind of like a small town. You know, it really doesn't feel like much. You look at the most recent version, it looks like a spaceport. Like a bunch of stuff is going on, you know. There's a bunch of different things going on. Like, all right, I could see why they'd meet there, you know. And it's the little things like that I think, yeah, be able to do that. But just to be able to get the film made, I think is a huge triumph. And the funny thing is that, you know what George was doing on opening day? You know how most people would do to premiere? George went to the beach with Steven Spielberg because he's like, you know what, this thing's gonna bomb. Hey, Steve, let's go to the beach. But the nice thing is, while they were there, guess what they did? They kind of hashed out ideas for Indiana Jones.
Sweet.
So, I hope that I've covered most of the highlights of A New Hope. Like I said, I recommend the making of Star Wars for any Star Wars fan. They've also got, they released the making of Empire about a year ago. I can't wait to find out what's in that one. Because if making of Star Wars was this good, and it really does, it's like, the nice thing is it's the making of a film, which is in itself a story. So you're going from beginning to end. And seeing just the transitions of this great space epic and space opera, and, you know, how it got dwindled. I say dwindled because I'm sorry, but it does kind of feel like they really whittled it down to, like, this thing. And it's like, and that's the great thing about it. Like I said before, Star Wars is such an expansive universe, an expansive story, that you can dwindle it down to this really almost simple thing by comparison, and yet you can just keep going with it. And it honestly, it is kind of a never-ending story, because it really doesn't end. Like, you can take it backwards and forwards and sideways and however you want to go. I mean, my fan films are about two Jedi and a princess that are not Han, Luke, and Leia. You know, they're about other characters that we don't ever see in the films, you know, because you can do that in Star Wars.
Because, you know, it's a giant universe.
Yeah.
Exactly, you know. But I've got all the core elements. I've got two Jedi and a princess and a Sith Lord and bounty hunters and pirates. Oh my. You know, and giant lizard samurai troopers.
Old pilots and more.
Old pilots and more.
Come on down.
And that's the great thing about it, and that's why, I gotta be honest, it's a lot of fun to play in George's sandbox, because he set up something so wonderful. And that's just it. I honestly feel like, you know, maybe I'm not looking for the same thing as other people, but I love how with each North film, or, you know, each episode of Clone Wars, you know, you get more into that universe, and you get more expansive, and you get to know that universe more. And the more that you know it, the more you realize, wow, I really don't know this universe as well as I thought I did. Because there's always something new to be added on, because we're, you know, it's discovery. You're always discovering something new. Like, I didn't know they had four-armed Jedi, but they did in Clone Wars, and it was awesome. With what was his name, General Krell, where that was a great four-part story arc where, you know, had the clones, and you had a Jedi general it was kind of a good precursor to Order 66. And, you know, that's just it. It's like, one of the things they do really great in Star Wars is not just delve into the universe itself, but they bring a human element into it. You know, they've done that in really everything, except for the holiday special.
Which I have seen.
I'm sorry. I'm really, really, really sorry.
It was my idea.
Yeah. Okay, well,
scheduled a meet up with my friends.
You're gonna shoot your own foot, expect to get hurt.
Well, that was at a time where it's like, Star Wars, it's awesome. It can do no wrong. And boy, did it do wrong.
Yeah.
Let's just say there was a lot of alcohol involved. A lot of alcohol.
On your part? Because if so, then I at least understand that.
Yes.
But hey, at least they introduced Boba Fett in it.
Yeah, that was actually the only good thing that came out of it. And that was actually in the cartoon part.
Yes, it was.
This is interesting. But, I guess the thing about Star Wars that, why did it become popular? No one really knows. Like, it really, like, when people saw it, because, like I said, George was training he was training his people at ILM to create the shots because they'd never done anything like that before. New cameras, new computers, everything was done so new that, it was winter of, we're talking, I think, October or November of 1976. The film was originally supposed to come out in December of 1976. They pushed it back to May of 1977 because the film wasn't ready. Because by the time George got done with principal photography with all the actors and took a look at the shots that ILM had, they had 4 shots done, none of which were acceptable to him. So he's like, all right, clearly you guys don't know how to do this. All right, I guess I'm going to have to get in here and help you and help teach you guys. And I think it goes back to the idea of he knew what he wanted to see, but he didn't know how to convey it, and he was also trusting people to do something that had never been done. He had the right idea, but he didn't have the technical know-how to do it. So he was having to deal with that. And like I said, he and Steven Spielberg went out to the beach during the opening day because they're like, it's going to bomb, whatever, we're going to go on vacation. They got back and were like, wait, what? We made a bunch of money? You're kidding me.
People are going again?
They're lining up? Because literally, they said this was the first time they had ever seen, talk to anybody about it who was there. They said this was the first time they'd ever seen a line around the building for a movie. The only way you can honestly describe it is a phenomenon. It just, no one really knows what happened. So much so that when the film came out, they didn't have action figures ready because they weren't expecting it. So they, in probably one of the greatest marketing ploys ever, sold kids an empty box and said, and it's basically an IOU. It's called the empty box thing. It wasn't called a thing. The empty box promotion. Basically, it was an empty box, but it had like images of the figures that would be there, or images of the characters that would be there. So it was like Han, Luke, Leia, Vader, 3PO, R2, and a Stormtrooper, and Obi-Wan. And what it is if you bought the box, you would get the figures for Christmas or later, because they hadn't been made yet because they weren't expecting to do so much business. But in a very interesting deal, Luke, what was it? George. There was something to do with like George didn't want to pay for rights how did it go? Like the studio didn't want to pay George a certain director's fee because they thought the movie was crap. Because they didn't see anything. They didn't have any shots ready, like I said, to do a really good trailer. If you go back and watch the original A New Hope trailer, there's like little to no shots in it. It's a lot of dialogue shots because those are easy to edit, and they don't have any effects in them. It's a really, no offense, it's a really lame trailer for the film because that's all they could put together with what they had. Mm-hmm. So, there was a deal that came out that said, the studio said, look, we're not going to pay you this much money because we don't really feel like it's worth it. He's like, that's fine. Just give me the sequel rights and the marketing rights. And they're like, okay, that's like the crappiest deal ever because nobody makes any money on marketing and sequel rights. Well, apparently they were idiots, as we know. But like I said, they didn't at the time. They didn't think anything of it because they're like, well, look, no one makes money on marketing. Nobody makes, okay, fine. If you want to make a couple t-shirts, lunchboxes, whatever. Well, clearly Star Wars knows really good at marketing. And it's because they know what they're doing. And it all goes back to George. You know, George was the guy that's, you know, I mean, you have to be, in any case like that, you know, if it's a project that you're passionate of, and he's clearly passionate about, enough to do 6 films, then a Clone Wars series, and finally he's like, all right, peace guys, I'm out of here. Disney, have fun.
Have fun making money.
Yeah. We will,
That was my worst Mickey Mouse.
not terrible, not terrible. But you know, they were, one nice thing about getting the money that they made from A New Hope was, he said, okay, now we can breathe. Now we can actually make this movie at a more comfortable budget. So Empire was budgeted at $18 million, which today I think is equivalent to $60 million. Still low budget by today's standards, but, and you can tell, if you watch A New Hope and then go watch Empire, you can tell that the level of production on Empire and effects are much better.
Oh, yeah.
And you also notice that Luke Skywalker can do flips. Why is that? Because they couldn't afford stunt doubles on the original.
Or wires, or...
Yeah, or wires for safety. The shot of Luke and Leia swinging against the chasm is literally Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher swinging against the chasm, and the only thing holding them up is this rope they're holding on to.
And that's a tiny rope, as I noticed.
Yeah, that is a complete 100%. Okay, people that say they do their own stunts, like, yeah. Okay, martial arts stuff is cool to watch, but you're not swinging across a chasm with no harness on. But that...
Or safety net.
The safety net. And let's face it, I mean... I'm not saying that you got to use special effects for everything, but if you can do a shot safer and still have it conveyed the way you want, I would say go with that, because you know the safety of your actors should be an important thing.
Yep.
But moving into Empire, you know, their biggest challenge as far as making of, they've done all the groundwork as far as like, okay, they had ILM up and running. The only real biggest challenge they had was Yoda. Because, you know, it was a puppet. And actually, they had a, who was it? You know, the thing is, we look at this, and it's like, you know, people of the time, adults of the time, some adults hated Empire because Yoda was a puppet. By the way, there were some adults at the time that A New Hope came out that hated C-3PO. Because they thought he was annoying.
There's always something.
I just would like to point out there is a trend. There's something in every movie that somebody finds annoying. I mean, it's, you know, the hard Jar Jar thing in Phantom Menace. Well, guess what? It was there with the Ewoks. It was there with Yoda. It was there with 3PO. It's there in every film. You know, people will find something that like, oh, that's annoying. Okay, get over it. It's fun. Or at least it's supposed to be fun.
Away with your hatred. I mean you no harm.
Very nice.
That's my somewhat good Yoda. Is it true that I think I heard this once. I don't remember if it was true or not. That Luke was Mark Hamill. That's the person I'm trying to get. Was originally there as just a line reader before he got the.
No, that's Harrison Ford.
Okay.
Harrison Ford was a line reader. He was there just to read with the different actors, and finally they're like, "This is for A New Hope." Finally, like, you know, Harrison's a good choice. He does the part well. Let's just cast him. And George is like, "Okay."
Okay.
Yeah, that's Harrison you're thinking of. Because honestly, and you can tell if you really, really look at the Han Solo character, why is he why does he have more swagger? Because Harrison Ford didn't want to be there. And it really is, it's almost kind of ironic or funny. I'm not even sure the right word to describe it. It's just kind of interesting because it's like, wow, parts that people think are really great, that actor really didn't want to be there, and he's just kind of like hamming it up because like, well, I've got to be here. I'm going to have some fun with it, even if I don't want to be.
And sometimes that makes the best performance.
Sometimes it does.
Not all the time, obviously.
Not all the time, you know, as long as it fits. But that is, and actually, it's funny because Mark was kind of like, well, Harrison, how did you get away with saying that line? He's like, I just did it. I didn't ask. I just did it. You know, just do what you want to do, and if they tell you not to, well, then stop doing it. But do stuff to see how far you can push it, you know?
Harrison's famous line in Empire Strikes Back, Leia says, "I love you," before he gets frozen, says, "I know."
Right.
I believe that was ad-libbed.
It was.
I think he...
The thing is, in the original script, it was, I love you too. But interesting thing about Empire Strikes Back is, it wasn't directed by George Lucas. It was directed by Irvin Kershner, who has unfortunately recently passed away. And they were going through it, and it's interesting, George hired him because he's like, look, this is a more character-driven movie. I don't have time to do this. I'm running like 5 companies at once. Here, you go do it, because I'm good with that. I got too much other stuff.
Kershner was one of Lucas's profs.
Yeah.
And,
and so he was going through the line, and they did take after take after take, and finally Irvin's like, Kershner's like, all right, don't think about it, just do it. He's like, I love you. I know. He's like, bang, that's it, perfect. He actually did it with that much passion. At least that's how it was on the video. There was actually probably more stuff ad-libbed in the films than we realized, but to really sit down and go through them all, that's the most famous one because, well, let's face it, it's probably the most romantic line out of all the films. So much so that I've known couples, or I shouldn't say I've known of couples that's, like how their thing. And I'm like, well, that's cute. It's, but that's what it is. It definitely had the romantic feel to it. Do you know why we have Ewoks in Return of the Jedi?
They were originally supposed to be a Wookiee planet.
Yes.
But that was deemed too expensive, so
yes.
they...
So they hired little people.
Yeah.
And got teddy bears costumes.
Well, I don't think they were intentionally to be... they were not intended to be teddy bears, but they looked a lot like them, so everyone called them that. Although it's funny, I do find it funny. It's like, those teddy bears are cannibals. Or, not cannibals, carnivores. Because, they do kind of capture Han and Luke and start to roast them on a fire. And here's a good question. Speaking of Return of the Jedi, if you get a chance, I think you can find it on YouTube. And at least if you can't find the exact video, but there's Kyle Newman, Kevin Smith, bunch of celebrities. They did a little fan documentary sort of thing, like almost a response of Return of the Jedi called Return of the Jedi. And they talk about different things, and one of the things they talk about is like, since when do the Ewoks know how to braid hair? Because, when you see, when they capture Leia, she's got her look, and then when you see her again, she's in like that burlap sack dress, and she's got her hair braided. Like, when exactly did they decide to sit there and just give her a makeover? So it really is just kind of like, some of those things you think about, especially I notice it more in the original trilogy, I guess, because, I don't know, because they do start to jump out at you like, wait a minute. Well, wait a second. No. But
I never had a problem with the Ewoks.
Oh, I never had a problem with it either. And actually, that's one of the things that...
maybe because I was young enough to not care.
You were. Well, there's a certain theory that says if you were born... I guess, Phil, you would actually probably fall in this category. Like, if you were born before 1970... Let's see, you were 6. So you were born in, 77, Phil?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you're born in, 1976, 78... Or 70, between 76 and on, you're going to like Ewoks. If you were born, say, 1970 or before that, you're going to hate them. It's because of your age. And I think that actually does kind of make some sense of truth. Because, let me tell you, 6-year-olds that saw Phantom Menace in the theaters love Jar Jar. They love Jar Jar the same way we love the Ewoks. Or Yoda. They see the goofiness in it. They see that kind of bumbling goofball. They don't see him as annoying. And I do think it goes back to the age. And it goes back to the fact that, it's funny. We're 3 grown men that are at least 30 years of age sitting here discussing what is, for a lot of people, because let's be honest, we are not the mainstream audience, but for a lot of mainstream audience people, tend to view Star Wars as kids' movies. which,
True.
I mean, it kind of feels weird to say that, but it's like, well, they are and they're not. I mean, yes, they're intended for kids, but they play on a level that really is for all ages. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they see them as kids' movies, and so they don't allow themselves to invest in it and really get the full effect out of it. But
sorry, awesome music that goes along with it. When did they get hit? When did they get the score involved? Was that?
Well, typically, and this is actually true for pretty much every movie. A movie is usually scored just like a couple months before it's done. I mean, you look at, okay, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Dark Knight, okay, it came out in what, July? We probably didn't do anything with the score till like April. It really depends on how much time of collaboration you have with the composer. As far as the score, you know, Steven told George about about John Williams because of his work on Jaws and Close Encounters. He's like, look, I've worked with this guy before. He's great. I mean, he's really, and George really wanted a more like 19th century leitmotif, you know, like Wagner and Dvorak and folks like them. I know you're like, yeah, I have no idea who these guys are.
Yep.
But it's the idea of, you know, you look at the Star Wars music, and most John Williams music, and what it has is themes for the characters and themes for different things, and that's very indicative of that 19th century music. They use a lot of that. Kind of think Peter and the Wolf. You're familiar with Peter and the Wolf, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically that, but for a 2-hour movie. And so, you know, they did that, and the crew that were, you know, that was the more American crew, because they had British crew. By the way, that's why all the bad guys in the original trilogy had British accents, because they were shooting in London, and they had British actors to work with. That's why all the Imperial guys have British accents.
Oh.
Because
Nice.
let's say they had decided to shoot, I don't know, Australia, where they shot 2 and 3, then they would have had Australian accents. Or if they shot it all in American, they wouldn't have any accents. So it's just one of those things. But they.
Oi, are you Darth Vader?
Oh, by the way, if you ever get a chance to check out the stock footage of Darth Vader's first entrance, it is hilarious. Listening to David Prowse, who played Darth Vader in all 3 films, say the dialogue, because he has a very country English accent. It does not sound like Darth Vader. In fact, it sounds probably more akin to what Andrew just spouted out.
So it's like that Eddie Izzard bit, where it's like if if Vader had the English accent, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, in fact, it's almost identical.
Here's something you can try. Pull out your Star Wars New Hope DVD.
Yeah.
Which came out 10 years ago, the special, and play the French track. It's hilarious. Being like Vader, break through the door and he's.
Oh, I gotta be honest. I watched episode 2 in French one day, and I'm like, this is incredibly weird, but awesome at the same time. Because Spanish, we're probably more familiar with that language, just because it's more common in this country. But you listen to French and you're like, huh? What are they doing? How are those sounds coming out of their mouths?
And then
It's such
go to German.
You can't. I would love to watch the Star Wars movies in German.
They don't have it in German?
No. You know why? Because
No.
German is not a widely used language.
Huh.
Spanish is a widely used language.
What about Chinese?
Well, of course, well, the thing is, it's not a widely used language here. That's the one thing. When they dub it for here, it's going to play to this audience and the American audience. There's a huge Hispanic population, and I guess they did it in French because probably because of Canada. I don't know what I'm thinking. Because of Canada.
Well, I would say in large part it's cultural because if we're saying that Star Wars never had a German track, I wouldn't be surprised because I mean, the times that I've been to Germany, and almost all of them speak English. In Denmark, almost everybody speaks English, etc. Right. But French culture, culturally, they don't like learning English in France. Right. So it makes a lot more sense if there's a French version.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because they want it in their language. And that's the other thing, too, is, like, when people think, oh, I don't want to go to this country because they don't speak English. It's like, most of Europe speaks English because it's almost like the States. You can go...
Yeah, it's a common language.
Yeah. I mean, English is the common language. And, if you live in Spain, you can go to Germany for vacation for a week. Yeah. And so it makes a lot of sense. Well, guess what? If I have to learn German, it's like, well, let's just all learn English. It's just easier for everybody. So, yeah, it is kind of that interesting. Yeah, it's a good point, Phil. I hadn't thought of that. I'd still like to watch the Star Wars films in German because I think it'd be cool. I always like the German language, so I think it'd be just it's a different sound. Ich liebe dich. Ich weiß.
Okay, how about the Star Wars films?
I love you. I know.
Star Wars films dubbed in Klingon.
Okay, now I'm sorry. I don't know if I can allow that kind of talk. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. We're actually not going to display that kind of hatred here because we are both Trek fans and Star Wars fans.
I don't even know how to Klingon sound, so I couldn't even do a fake impersonation.
Yeah, kind of like German.
Okay.
Like yeah.
No, I mean, that would. You know what? I think Phil. That's a good point. I'm thinking about that. If they dubbed a Star Wars film in Klingon, do you know how many confused fans there would be?
Oh yes.
Because they'd be like, we don't know whether to love this or hate it.
I'd be one of those. I wouldn't hate it, but I'd be like, I'm just confused about everything.
Well, yeah.
Thank God for subtitles.
It would be like that, the whole subplot in Fanboys about, them stopping in Iowa to tick off and mess with a bunch of Trek fans. And it's like, yes, but if you redubbed A New Hope in Klingon, both sides would be like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, this is both awesome and incredibly wrong at the same time.
It's like, did you just combine chocolate and peanut butter, or did you just dump peanut butter on tuna? What happened?
We don't know yet.
This could go wrong or very well.
So that's our challenge to you, the fans. Redub A New Hope in Klingon.
And add a Sclamster in the background. Flying in space.
That's what Star Wars needs. Star Wars needs more Sclamsters.
I think everything needs more Sclamsters.
Here's our bumper stickers. Now you're thinking with Phil. No one expects the Phil, and everything's better with Sclamsters. So, I'm trying to think if I left anything out. The making of A New Hope, like I said, that was lengthy because that one was the one that was so important. And it made so many groundbreaking things as far as like, the idea of a used universe. George was constantly having to stop his crew from cleaning up the place because he's like, no, I want it dirty. The movable, Dijksterflex camera was a big step because that allowed, what were models to not look like models. The thing is that once you got so much groundwork laid, like, I wouldn't say everything else kind of fell into place, but certainly for Empire it was much easier. Return of the Jedi was a little bit easier as well. The prequels, oddly enough, while they did, they had a lot of the groundwork laid, they were still pushing the limits. Jar Jar was the first main character that was CGI ever in a film. Episode 2 was the first film to be shot in digital video. It wasn't shot on film.
Right.
I would say...
You know what's nice about Star Wars is, love it or hate it, you cannot deny the fact that because they did what they did, they advanced filmmaking as a whole.
Yeah, and they continue to do that.
If you pick a movie, somewhere, somehow, Star Wars helped make that movie to be what it is. Just from either the technology, the editing style, or
the love of it, like Fanboys.
Or the love of creating Star Wars has had a hand. So, I would certainly agree that it's a historical point.
I would really like to bring this back to my other passion. Phil, I've lent you the DVD of Batman the Animated Series. Do you recall the episode Heart of Ice with Mr. Freeze?
Yeah, that one was really good.
Yeah, that's probably like the quintessential episode in that show. Well, you recall in that episode, after one of Freeze's men, he freezes his legs, and Batman takes him back to the cave and puts him in what pretty much looks like a Bacta tank. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Well, that's because it's supposed to be a Bacta tank. When Paul Dini was writing it, he's like, he should basically put him in a Bacta tank.
Is that why they froze Batman upside down and hanging by his legs?
I think so, yes. I mean, Paul Dini was such a huge Star Wars fan. That's why you actually start. And in fact, there's an episode in the 4th season where the Joker. Oh, it's the episode Mad Love, which deals with Harley's origin. Mm-hmm. In the opening scene, they're at supposed to be at a Gordon goes to a dentist's office, but the dentist is actually the Joker, and he's about to kill him and stuff. So I can't even say this without laughing. You know that Mark Hamill's playing the Joker, okay? Which, you gotta know that going in, because when the Joker belts up the line, "May the floss be with you," to Commissioner Gordon, you just can't help but oh my god, so much nerdgasms right now. This is awesome. So, and I've actually had a theory with Batman films, but the better the Batman film is, it's because there's a Star Wars person in there. You had Billy D. Williams in Batman '89. Playing Harvey Dent, also played Lando Calrissian. You had Batman the Animated Series. Mark Hamill played the Joker, also played Luke Skywalker. That was really good. Batman Begins, you had Liam Neeson, who played Qui-Gon in Episode 1, played Ducard / Raz.
Yeah.
The only exception being Dark Knight. I haven't quite... I'm sure there's a Star Wars connection there somewhere. I just haven't figured it out yet.
Someone who worked on the film somehow is also involved with Star Wars somewhere, somehow, maybe.
Or at least inspired by it to go into... Who knows?
I'm sure there was at least one Star Wars fan present on set.
Oh, yeah.
At all times.
Oh, yeah. But, and that's just it. Is actually, for many years, for the last few years, there were talks of a live-action series. The biggest problem was cost, because George basically said, look, we want to do in an hour... we want to do film quality effects and shooting and everything in an hour. But guess what? When you do that for 2 hours, it costs you like $152 million, $200 million. We want to do it for one. We want to shoot each episode for $1 million. That is incredibly hard to do when you're just talking about a difference in cost. And so that really is the next challenge, is to advance filmmaking to the point that it's cheaper. So that we can get the effects, we can get all the shooting, the editing processes done, so that it's more cost efficient, so that it's cheaper.
And hopefully we'll get there one day.
I hope so. Because,
and now that Disney owns it, Disney has deep pockets.
Disney does have deep pockets, but
they do want to make money still, so they won't just throw money at it.
I guess that kind of brings us to a good way to kind of wrap this up is, we've got Episode 7, which I gotta be honest, I never thought would happen.
Neither did I.
Except apparently George Lucas did, because when they were making the original trilogy, George asked Mark if he'd be willing to play an old mentor figure in his 60s. George, it's some kind of I think George maybe, not necessarily playing it out, but I think he had it, hey, this would be cool to do one day if we're still up for it and still...
Alive,
yeah.
Alive and kicking.
I've talked about this a little bit before, just kind of looking at the pattern. I do think, it's going to be handing it off, passing the torch to the next generation. So I think, if we get Han, Luke, and Leia, guess what? They're not going to be the main characters. They'll be sideline characters. We're going to get...
And they shouldn't be.
And they shouldn't be. I do think Luke would be an older mentor figure, much like Qui-Gon, much like Obi-Wan, like Ben Kenobi was. I also think he's going to die in the first movie, because that's what happens to the old mentor figure in the first movie of the trilogy. I also think that he's like your youthful Padawan trainer, whatever you want to call him, like that generational person. You had Anakin in episode 1, Luke in episode 4, so-and-so's kid. I'm guessing it's going to be a Skywalker offspring in episode 7, because that does seem to be the trend so far, but who knows? But they'll probably get one of their hands chopped off in the second movie, because that's par for the course. And then in the third movie, they will fight whatever bad guy on some sort of a bridge or big ship thing with an evil an evil person on the sidelines egging them on, because that's also par for the course.
Well, here's the challenge. Maybe they won't go par for the course.
Maybe they won't, but I'm just saying,
The thing is, it's wide open.
It was wide open, and that's kind of what is interesting about it, because this is the first time, like, I remember, and we'll talk about this on our next episode when we actually get into things. The lead up for the prequels was interesting because you at least kind of had an idea where you were going. You're like, okay, we're leading up to episode 4. We understand. We're going to see the fall of Vader. We're going to see the fall of the Republic into the Empire. We had a vague idea what we're going to be seeing. But with this, we have no clue where we're going. And it's exciting, but it's also kind of scary. So Phil, what are your thoughts on the future of Star Wars?
Well, first a question. Have any of the original cast, Leia, Han Solo, Luke, have they been confirmed for episode 7 or not? Because I keep hearing rumors that it's not a rumor, or it's like, it's
Mark Hamill actually he tried to confirm it, but the studios kind of shut him up. Because he was going around saying, yeah, I'm in, and they've been having his training, and now it's I believe it's confirmed. I think what it is like they're there, but they're it's kind of like they're tying up the red tape, like dotting the T's, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, sort of thing. Like they're getting all the formalities together, but they're in it. That's my understanding. But at any rate, I mean, do you have any personal things, like personal ideas as far as like what to look for, what to stay away from?
Good question. It's kind of like, my reaction is kind of like the guy, what's his name, who greenlit A New Hope back in the 70s. He says, I have no idea what this is, but it looks cool, so I want it to be made. That's kind of how I'm looking at this too. I honestly have no idea what it'll be.
Yeah.
I think J.J. Abrams will do a good job, but if it has kind of like the pacing of like the first 2 Star Trek movies, it works for those movies, but for Star Wars, I don't know. But on the other hand, J.J. has done like really slow, thoughtful stuff like
Lost.
the movie with the kids and the filming the alien.
Oh yeah, Super 8, which I never got to see.
Super 8. That's a really, really good movie. I think they've picked a good director for it. But there's like so many question marks with it. It's so much potential for excitement.
Yeah.
And there are ways it could suck as well, but I don't think it will. I don't know. I have no idea.
Probably a good way to be, because sometimes if you this definitely happened with, I was talking to another friend of mine about this the other day, and I was like, it's interesting because I remember, like, with the prequels, leading up, at least episode 2, probably to some extent with episode 1, but leading up to it's like, I remember talking to my friends after episode 1, and like, the Clone Wars, we had in our heads, like, a bunch of Boba Fett's, Mandalorian guys, fighting a bunch of Jedi. Like, that's what somehow we thought the Clone Wars was going to end up being. Clearly, that's not what it was. So you want to be careful.
No, actually, that kind of is what it was.
It is. Well, it is. Yeah. Because they were Jango Fett. Yeah, so, I mean, it is. But, I mean, we're talking about, like, the look of Boba Fett, not the actual character, but the look of Boba Fett.
Okay.
Which was still there in the original Clone Trooper design. But I would, and it's also, people have had this reaction with other movies they really look forward to. It's like, I think, Phil, you probably have the healthiest way to look at this of, It's cool. I'm excited. I hope they don't miss anything. Don't go too far from what we've come to expect from Star Wars. But I honestly have no idea what to look for, because then you're not marrying yourself to certain ideas. Because if you do that, then you're definitely going to disappoint yourself.
I see, the prequels, they had built-in constraints, because you have Anakin Skywalker, you know that he turns to the dark side, you know that the Empire rises, so you know that all these things are going to come in, so you do have some prepackaged elements that will have to be there. But with this, I have no idea, and I haven't read the books, which were written in the 90s, I guess, following what happens.
Well, they've been written since the 90s. They're still writing them. They've got them from after the events of Return of the Jedi to before the. Look, Old Republic. It's like thousands of years before Episode 1, and they've got it like 3 or 4 generations past Return of the Jedi, where it's like Luke's great-grandson or something. It's like, it's ridiculous. Part of the reason I'm like, I'm just gonna watch some movies and Clone Wars, because that's all I can really keep up with. It's a lot, because it's a huge, expensive universe, and we're really puny. We're just tiny little specks, just like the size of Mickey Rooney.
I guess my only question of it would be, how much of the expanded universe would they include? Like, I know in some book somewhere that Chewie got killed.
Yeah, the whatchamacallit, the Vector Prime from the new Jedi Order books.
And would they actually, in those expanded universe, you said Luke turned to the dark side for a time. Would that be, referenced or included somehow, some way? So to me, it's like I'm kind of having the same sense as Phil. Is like I'm going to try to go with it as an open mind as possible in terms of it's Star Wars, therefore I'm probably going to like it. I'm going to be careful about it, but I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be a Star Wars fan, because you want to be excited, but I think with the prequels, at least we had a vague idea, so we're like, okay, we're on board with this concept. And I was like, we have no idea what to expect, where they're going to go. I would probably say a word of caution to people who are real big fans of the EU. Don't expect anything from the expanding universe to pop up in the new films. Because, and let me let me say why. Because if you're expecting it and it's not there, you're going to be disappointed. If you don't expect it and it's there, it's a happy plus. You're going to be pleased. But if you don't expect it and it's not there, you're not going to be disappointed. Because from what I understand, 7, 8, and 9 is a story treatment from George Lucas, and George kind of treats the expanding universe like fan fiction. He's like, all right, you can play in certain areas, but look, I'm really not going to pay this too much mind. Now, there are occasions where he's pulled in characters from the expanding universe because he's liked the way it's been done or something. He's like, yeah, I like that idea. I'm going to pull it in. Like Aayla Secura, the Twi'lek Jedi from Episode 2 and 3. With the 2 head tails. That was an expanding universe character. She got pulled into the films because he honestly just liked the look of the character. Quinlan Vos, fan favorite in the expanding universe. I'm familiar with the character from some of the comics. He was in a couple episodes of Clone Wars because, like the character. Just don't ask. Don't expect Mara Jade, because George has kind of gone on record. I'm not sure if he was joking or not, but if you watch the Robot Chicken special features, he expresses extreme hatred for Mara Jade in those. But like I said, that could just be a joke that he's doing to people. I don't know. But like I said, don't expect anything from the expanding universe, because
maybe he'll finally include that Green Rabbit who was in the early comics.
I hope he doesn't.
I forget his name, but it was funny.
I don't know. For some reason, I get that crossed with Bucky O'Hare,
which was awesome.
So,
Bucky, Captain Bucky O'Hare.
But it's interesting because Bucky O'Hare was also a space fantasy.
Yes, it was.
It's all coming full circle.
So. And with that, I'm about to pass out.
So I think that's. Unless you have anything else to add.
No, how about you, the Phil?
I'm fine for now.
Fine for now. That's well eloquently put, sir.
Well, in that case,
this is going to do it for the Freakacast, so...
sabers up and freaks out.
Freaks in.